Two AT&T lines went down today. One line was clear probably about 30 minutes ago, and we're still waiting on the second line.
Okay.
All right. So then we're going to get into matters related to Durham, particularly the consent decree. And I expect that Durham will be addressing some of those issues as well. FDEP matters and some general matters also that I want to bring to the council. The mayor and I have already discussed some of these issues, questions and answers, and then hopefully we can go home. So with that, Mr. President, if you would allow me 1 second for
You
some
have it, sir.
housekeeping items.
Mhm.
I want to welcome all of you. I want to welcome the mayor and thank you for the opportunity and taking the time to meet with us today and to discuss these matters. I know you got pressing issues that doesn't relate to our work here in the city. I want to thank the mayor and his staff for taking the time, along with Julio Ponce, for taking a tour with us on Thursday, March the 24th. We got an opportunity to travel all throughout the city. We saw and visited a lot of our facilities, and I hope that that was helpful, understanding what we do on a day-to-day basis. The last workshop was March the 1st. We discussed a new format for the water bills. We covered water conservation measures and had a brief introduction to the benefits and costs of automatic meter readings. Some of the material we're going to be covering today may be repetitious. So, and by the way, I don't want to stand up here and talk for a couple hours, for 3 hours without interrupt me, ask questions. When the people we have joining us today make their presentation, feel free to ask questions because that's going to be
Thank you.
helpful to us that you understand what it is that we do. We covered already some of the material that we're going to be discussing. And if you open your book, the first page, you see a famous quote by Teddy Roosevelt. And it's very interesting. And I thought about not only this process, but all of you, and as well as my department staff and the county staff. And the fact that every day we are in the public arena. And I'm going to tell you something I learned a long time ago. The most difficult job there is municipal government because you're closer to the people.
Yeah.
The county has a buffer. The state has a buffer. The feds have definitely a buffer. So we deal with the public on a day in, day out basis. So not only my staff, but the citywide staff does a great job handling some of these issues to just achieve the public good. Item number 1. You flip the page and go to section 1. Before we get started on finances, I want to discuss with you a little bit about the metrics, the social metrics of Hialeah. I think it helps to understand where we as a city stand compared to the state and compared to Miami-Dade County. For instance, in the 2020 census, these are two metrics that we track. These are two metrics that rating houses in New York track because that's how they determine some of our credit ratings. The median household income in Hialeah was $38,471. That's a lot better than it was in the 2000 or the 2010 census. The last census was much lower than that. The percent of persons in poverty in the city is 19%. So how do we compare with Miami-Dade County? And that's in your book. The Miami-Dade County median household income is $53,975 versus the Hialeah $38,471. The percent of poverty in the Miami-Dade County is 15% compared to Hialeah 19%. And when you look at the state of Florida and compare Hialeah to the statewide averages, you have the Hialeah household income is the state household income is $57,435, very similar to Miami-Dade County. Again, Hialeah is 38,471. For the state poverty line, people under that $25,000, 926 threshold is 12.7% compared to Hialeah, 19%. I'm only presenting this to you, again, because there are metrics that we track. There are things that we discuss when we discuss rates, when we discuss finances. There are things that you're going to see if you haven't read the Fish report that reviews our bonds. And it's important when we enter into these kind of discussions, and discussions we're going to be having in the June, July, August, September timeline for the budget, that these metrics be kept in front of you, because you're the policymakers, and your decisions impact each and every resident in this community. If you flip to the next page, there's a lot of shocking orange papers. That's how we subdivided the book. You're going to see an account statement. This is what we talked to Councilman Calvo about. And it deals with breaking out the items. And what do these fees mean? And what it means is that the tax rate for services countywide is 10% on water. Franchise fees continue to be added and included in our rates and stand at 4%. We're going to talk about franchise fees and what franchise fees has meant to the department in the last several years since the 2012 timeline.
Mr. Riedel, excuse me, the first fee of 10% was what?
The
Please
10%
remind
is
me.
taxes on
Yes, sir.
water.
Collected by our
We
municipality.
collected, we send it to the
To
county.
the county. Very good. Thank you, sir.
Franchise fees is at 4%.
Yes, sir.
And we're going to be discussing what that meant and what that means to the department and what that have meant since 2011 or 2012 financially to us, and the downside of not doing it. And you and Vivian are pretty much aware of that. Then the Durham fees. The Durham fees are 6%. And what that means is that every utility pays Durham, for the county, a 6% fee for our permit fees. We get a water permit and a sewer permit to operate in this county. And that's a way of funding the cost of Durham as a regulatory agency providing services to this community. I signed an increase back in, I believe it was 1995, when I was county manager, increasing that fee to 7.5% or 7%. And it's now 6%. So it's still included and embedded in our rates. You continue through, and you're going to see, as you flip through your pages, you're going to see the franchise fee study. You're going to see 2 water and sewer rate studies. One was done in 2016. The other one was done in 2020, 2021. The rating houses in New York require us to do rate studies every 4 to 5 years. And with this, I'd like to call Debbie Swain to discuss her analysis, not only of the franchise fees that we have gone through before, but also the rates.
Ma'am, for the record, just name and address once again. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. Debbie Swain, 2025 Southwest 32nd Avenue, Miami, Florida. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, council members. I have a presentation, if you can pull up my PowerPoint. There it is. This is not nearly as exciting as the conservation one I did a few weeks ago. The first thing I wanted to cover is the franchise fee study that we did last summer, July of 2021. And if you go to the next page, you see the first thing that I did in the analysis was just take a look at other municipalities, other areas, and see how much they charge generally as a percentage of total revenues for franchise fees, how much the utility has to collect and remit. I've got City of Hialeah at that time was for a period of time ranging between 7.5% and 10%, but the average from the other municipalities was quite a bit lower than that, except for City of Pembroke Pines. On the next page, what I did then is take a look and see how much the total franchise fees collected represented of the rate increases that the water and sewer department was getting. And we found it from between 2014, which was a large payment for franchise fees, through what we budgeted for 2020, about 17% of the rate increase revenues went to pay franchise fees. So that's a significant portion of the revenues. This was included, of course, the first year, the 2014, that there was a large catch-up payment. The effect on the bills was that the 7.5% franchise fee, at the time that we did the study, that's what was in place, represented about $4.50 a month and $55 a year of the water and sewer bill. To the average customer, that was 8% of their bill. And as it is, the water and wastewater bill is 1.74% of median household income, and that's from the 2019 census. During the years 2016 to 2020, your audited financial statements included several audit findings related to financial position of the water and sewer department. One was concerning the utility's negative unrestricted net cash position, which had been deteriorating as a result of operating losses and capital asset investments. And there was finally an audit finding that said the utility should take a look at its current rates and come up with a strategy to eliminate the deficit. The recommendations that we made in the franchise study was to amend the franchise fee ordinance so that the franchise fee was between a range of 3% and 6%, and that has actually been in place now. And to also take a look at the franchise fees every 5 years. And at the same time that we're looking at the water and sewer rates every 5 years, let's take a look at the franchise fees as well. And finally, that the franchise fee should be a separate line item on the customer bill rather than embedded in rates. That ensures that, first of all, the customers are aware of where their payments are going, but also very importantly, that the proper amount of franchise fee is actually collected from each customer, and it's not dependent upon the rate structure and how much someone uses. Do you have any
Ms.
questions?
Swain,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah, does that franchise fee is paid directly to the general fund?
Correct.
It's money owed to the general fund, collected, not kept by the department. Thank you, ma'am.
That's right.
Any questions so far from my colleagues? Go on, ma'am.
Okay.
I have a question. So
Oh,
the
go
operating
on.
cost is the city operating cost or the water and sewer department?
I'm sorry. say
The
that-
operating cost, was it the city or was it just the water and sewer department?
You're asking about the franchise fee itself?
No. I'm talking
The-
about, you
just
said
in general.
there were a deficit of the operating
Oh,
cost. So we need to-
yes. Yes, the operating expenses of the water and sewer utility, as well as the capital expenditures that were not debt financed. Those
Gotcha.
are paid for out of rates. So that created a cash shortfall.
Got it.
And so that's a good segue into the rate study portion of what I wanted to tell you about. We did a rate study, concluded it in May of 2020. When we do that rate study, we take a look at historical operating events, the costs, the capital expenditures, the debt obligations. We have to look at historical growth to project growth. We do a projection of your costs and of your revenues without any changes in rates. We take a look at consumption patterns, and we take a look at your current rate structure. We assumed in our projections that there would be a 2.2% inflation adjustment and also a pass-through for the water, Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Department water cost and sewer cost. And that would result in an increase of 6.6% for water and 9.9% for sewer. That was the starting point of our study. The next page, which should be invisible to the naked eye, you actually have that
It worked.
somewhere in the rate study, but I didn't want to get bogged in the details of it. This is just a schedule that shows the cost that we incorporated to determine what the cash shortfall was and therefore what was needed in revenue increases. And the shortfall we identified is on the next page. What we do is we look at how much the revenues are needed to cover all your costs and your capital expenditures and meet your debt obligations and your debt coverage requirements, and compare it to the projected revenues and determine what the shortfall was. You had just had a rate increase in October 2019, and we were projecting with that rate increase, which went through fiscal year 2020, that you were going to have a shortfall. The utility was going to have a shortfall of about $7 million. And we left that there because it was temporary, and we found that making adjustments were going to compensate for that in the future years. By deficit, I mean it reduced your cash reserves. There was cash there, but it reduced it. It wasn't maintaining an appropriate level. The conclusion from our study, our rate study, is that, as I said, the rates that were implemented in 2019 were adequate to cover all your operating expenses and a good portion of the capital expenditures, but they still had that $7 million shortfall. By increasing the rates in the 4 subsequent years, by just passing through how much the Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Department increase was and also an inflationary increase, we projected that that would be sufficient to fully cover all the costs and maintain something better than a deficit level. It was actually going to provide some stability. And also the debt service coverage, which is required by your bondholders, would be achieved. The recommendations we made in the rate study was to adjust annually for inflation, to adjust annually for the Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Department rate increases. It would mitigate the need to draw on cash reserves, continue to monitor the revenue sufficiency every year to make sure that your cash balance is stable, and also to look at any subsequent capital program beyond what we projected to make sure that it was not going to exacerbate your cash position. That's all I have, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Ms. Swain. Any questions from the
No.
dais?
Through the chair.
Yes, sir. You're recognized.
Good afternoon. So my question was, so as part of this study, were you able to compare our rates as compared to another municipality or an unincorporated area? Essentially, where do we fall in line with those? Okay,
I was gonna-
got it, got it. Okay.
It is
thank-
there, and it's not in what I have in my hand.
Yes, sir. Are you trying to get anybody
no.
here? No? Okay. Anyone else?
All right, thank you.
Ms. Swain, thank you so much.
Oh,
Oh, yes,
sorry.
ma'am, come back. Thank you. You're recognized.
So after the inflation, you said that the average per month was $4.50 or $55 per year, right? After
That's,
the,
that's the franchise fee portion of the rates, yes.
right, but then after that inflation, did that change that water fee to $8.50? Is that what I'm seeing here? Per month?
Where are you looking at?
On page 8, but I don't know if this is separate to the connection fee based on anticipated daily water and sewer volumes. And then it says the fee for water is $8.50 and for sewer it's $2.76. That's not after the inflation fee, right? Because I don't see what was the study after the inflation fee. Was there a cost connected to it?
I don't have the average cost here in front of me. The $4.50 was specifically just the piece out of the average bill that was associated with the franchise fee. And I think what you're talking about is the average bill with everything.
Right.
Okay. You had that. Oh, the connection fee. Okay, so the connection fee is a brand-new customer connecting for the very first time. So you've never had service before, you're on a vacant lot, you're getting a line and getting a connection. That is the amount that you would pay, and that is per gallon per day. So a developer in your annexed area or somewhere else is going to do an estimate of what the demand is at that location. If it's a single-family residence, it might be 200 gallons per day, something along those lines, 300 gallons per day. You take that number and you multiply it by the impact fee per gallon, and it's a one-time charge, never to be paid again. So that's what that impact fee is.
And that's separate from the connection fee that's being charged through Durham as well. Because there's a connection fee through Durham.
Right. Yes,
So they're getting double connection fees.
there's, remember, right, the city's fee is based upon the city's costs, and the county fee is based on the county's cost. So it's not that there's double, it's that there's two parts to it. Two different entities are incurring costs that they are collecting from the customer.
All right. Thank you. And then the inflation fee, the total of that would be what? What was the final result? Because if the average was, let's say, 8%, what is now after the inflation fee? Would we say it's around 10 to 12%? Is now the new average rate?
For the monthly rates
Yes.
to customers, no, the actual amounts that went into effect based upon inflation were a little bit different than what we projected, and certainly right now, inflation is much higher. I don't have the CPI numbers for this past year when we are experiencing such high inflation, and it's not necessarily an overall rate. It's specific to utility costs when we look at that rate. So I'm not sure what that rate is for utilities
So we're expected for those monthly bills to increase due to inflation,
or the inflation, yes.
an average of 2% per bill.
Right.
Okay. And when does that begin, or did that already start?
It will be in your budget. It will be in your part of the Water and Sewer Department budget. They'll propose what the rate needs to be. And if it generates too much, I mean, you can apply a CPI, and when you look at it, it may generate too much or too little, but as long as it's within, keeps you out of a deficit position, that's what they would present. And you'll review it as part of the budget process, and it would go into effect October 1st.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Wong.
Through the chair.
Yes, sir, you're recognized.
So we're in, you said 5-year plan, right? Pretty
Right.
much. So 2020, so this is going to run through 2025,
We went through 2024, I believe, in here.
2024. So pretty much a 2% every year in order to make up
It
the.
started out 2.2, and then it went up a little bit higher.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Quite possible, Ms. Swain, that because of the unusually high inflation rate that we're going to be looking at an increase of higher than the 2%
Oh, yes.
neighborhood we've been at. So we may be looking at the good times right now.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, thank
And
you,
they,
ma'am.
and again, they'll look at that.
Yeah,
So- And that's going to be responded to.
thank you, ma'am.
One thing that I'd like to address.
Approaches, I think of the Academy Awards. I'm sorry, sir. I get a little nervous.
Be careful, it's not the other way around.
I know.
That deserves for you to walk back up here again, Mr.
Clarify
Rizal.
something on the record. Franchise fees, you said that we owe them to the general fund.
Oh.
Always a very strong term, if I may.
Yeah.
Franchise fees were imposed at a time where the general fund was in an extremely difficult position. But what you have is a municipal utility
Mhm.
using municipal rights-of-ways,
Mhm.
paying for the right to use municipal rights-of-ways. We're not Florida Power and Light. We're not a private utility. And I understand the legalities of it. And I understand it has been tested from a constitutional standpoint. But we need to be cognizant of the fact that sometimes we need to be careful regarding the relationship between fees and property taxes. And if, and you heard me say this before, if the franchise fees were not there and you kept the millage at 6.3018, you would not have enough revenue coming in to operate on the general side of the house. So how, that's what this little chart represents. And I want to address something the mayor said on an article at the New Herald, El Nuevo Herald, which I fully agree with what he said. He said the department has been used, the Department of Water and Sewer, and I'm going to paraphrase, como una alcancía, like a piggy bank. And you know what? When you look at it, and you look at the numbers, and we're going to go through the numbers in a minute, that is very, very, very accurate. There's the other side of the argument that says, if we haven't done that, what would happen to the city? And some of you had an opportunity to meet privately with me when we went through the budget last year. And I explained at that point in time that in 2011, 2012 timeline, we had two options. One was declaring a fiscal emergency, and the other one was defaulting on a loan bank. They were not good options for a public entity, for a municipality. With that, I just want to tell you that as a chart, we were looking at it this morning, and that's where the $19 million you see on that first line come in. That was a transaction between the general fund, the solid waste fund, and the water fund, where the decision was made to move the solid waste fund under the umbrella of the water and sewer fund. The solid waste fund owed the general fund much more than the $19 million. And the solid waste fund borrowed. There is a note that was approved by this, not this council, not you personally, but previous council. There is a note for $19 million. And the $19 million was used for solid waste to take over, basically purchase, transfer of assets, most of the property on the north compound, except I believe for the police department and maybe another building. And that now today belongs to the solid waste department. On top of the $19 million, through time, the transfer of funds through the franchise fees to the general fund is on average approximately $33 million. That's a hefty amount.
Say that number again, I'm
What's
sorry.
that
33
period?
million, it's in your schedule. I
Yeah,
just gave you the
33.
little schedule. 33 million.
And that's a period of how long, sir?
That's from 2014 to 2022. And that's a big number. If you flip your page one more and go, you're going to see a letter from the county. You're going to see a letter from, letterhead is from Carlos Alvarez as mayor of Miami-Dade County.
Give us a minute to get there. Give us a
Need to
minute
look-
to get there, please.
Yeah, you see it?
This page.
It's just
There we
behind
go.
the rate study.
Oh,
After
the
one of
rate
the pink
study.
paper. Yeah.
Divider.
There's two rate studies.
Going back to the 1950s, when the Water and Sewer Authority was created, Hialeah had entered into some kind of an agreement with Miami-Dade County where the water plant on Okeechobee Road, the ownership of that water plant was transferred to the county. This is all anecdotal because we have not been able to get our hands on that agreement. We haven't found the agreement, and neither has WASA. When they took over that, the county started operating the agreement, and they have agreed to give us a discount of 11% on the water sales to us. That was in place for years. For years. Until 2008. In 2008, and these are things that affect the rates. When you talk about the rates and you want to, these are things that affect the rate. In 2008, the city reached an agreement with the county where that 11% discount was going to be phased out over a 5-year period. That 11% discount represents about 1.2, 1.2 and a half, $1.3 million a year on average. And if you take 13 years worth of discount, that's in excess of $16 million. Those are some of the pressures that we have faced, and we continue to face, given the finances of the department. Do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Oh, ask.
Anyone yet?
No,
Okay.
no, no. Actually,
If you flip one more page, you're going to see something called Arcadis, CPI versus Wassa wholesale rate. You see it?
Hold on.
Repeat what the title was, I'm sorry?
Right here.
It looks like this. You're going
Oh,
to see,
CPI.
you're going to see
Yeah.
the back, a bunch of
Yeah.
little curves like this. We're only going to talk about one curve. Miami-Dade County Water and Sewer Authority, basically, when you take a look at their financials, distributes costs among two systems. One will be the local system or the local municipal system. Remember, unincorporated municipal service area is like a city, largest city in Miami-Dade County. And then the regional system. Several years back, Miami-Dade County changed the definition of a regional system. And what that did was transfer costs between, I'll take some. Between, from the
It's made
regional
with
s-
Hialeah
from-
water.
From the local system. What was that?
It's made with Hialeah water, por eso sabe, don Rico.
Transfer some costs. Yes, it is.
For the county folks.
Yeah. Transfer some costs from their local unincorporated area to the regional system. So in essence, by changing the definition of what a regional system is, which deals with the diameter of pipes and the distribution system and so on and so forth, additional costs were taken away from unincorporated Dade County and transferred to the cities. Politically, it's a win. I don't blame him for doing that. Why? Because this is the issue. This is the reason why. You transfer the concerns, the complaints of increasing water rates to the city, the county, to the city. And you let the cities deal with it. Now let's deal with something that the president brought up. Take a look at that little square on the bottom, called sewer. Right? Forget about the little gray line, that's CPI. Let's concentrate on a couple of issues. Let's concentrate on the dark line, which is the actual sewer, wholesale sewer rates of the county. And I want you to pay attention. I know I'm the engineer, right? I want you to pay attention to the slope of that line, the inclination of that line. Where is that line going? Look at the bottom line. Look at the axis. It says 2022. Projected up 30%. And where is that line going? If you project that line, where's it going to go? Up.
Yeah.
It ain't going down. It ain't going down. That's the answer to your question. That's the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of reasons that that's driven, right? Reason one of the main reasons you hear them complain about their consent decree. And it's real. Their capital plans are real. They need to generate new revenue in order to meet those commitments. Inez, I don't know if she's here. Inez has sent me some information, because she tracks the county action, that the county was contemplating issuing new debt of $400 million thereabouts, if I remember correctly, the discussion. In that sense, the only way you can issue new debt is to have revenue, because revenue needs to feed that debt. And the only way to have new revenue is to increase rates. And if you transfer the rates, or the large portion of the rates, to the cities, that's the expectation that we have. Not only are we going to be impacted by CPI, inflation is at 7%, maybe 7.9%. We're going to be impacted by whatever comes out, and we're not going to know until the June. Carl and I were just kicking this around in the car, the June, July timeline, when we get the new, the true-up study from Miami-Dade County, what those rates are going to look like. But the expectation that we have, at least in the short term, is that those rates are going to go up. How much, we can't tell you. Now, to the question that Brian had regarding comparison. If you flip one more time.
Just going to ask that again.
You're going to get to a page that has a bunch of tables in the back. And you're going to see a bunch of cities listed. And it says on the top, comparison of monthly sewer bills, City of Hialeah 2020. We didn't get a chance to update it, getting ready for this discussion. Miami-Dade County is number 3 from the top. You see where it says Wausau Residential? And then down the bottom, 6 from the bottom is Hialeah as far as the average sewer. And that deals, Carl and I went through it this morning, that deals exclusively with rates. That doesn't deal with any fees included in there that we can tell. So, but Homestead, Orlando, Medley, Fair Harbor, North Miami Beach have, for that average customer, higher rates. Now, if you do me a favor and you flip the page one more time to the next page, you're going to see the comparison on water. And it's the same consumer. And you're going to see Miami-Dade County Residential 1250, and number 1 on the list. And you go down, you see Orlando, Orange County, Homestead, Opelika, and then you see Hialeah. And then you see below Hialeah, more expensive than Hialeah, St. Cloud, Miami Beach, Hollywood, North Miami, Tampa, Medley, North Miami Beach, Surfside, and Bay Harbor. That's a comparison we did in 2020 because we wanted to answer that same question that was asked today. How do we compare with others? That's how you compare with others.
Sir, can I ask you something before we go on, in case, or unless you were going to ask it? Is this a result of what you explained, the regional changes, and now they've transferred more of the cost of maintaining the system to us?
That's a result.
How do we explain that to
Yeah,
to our
that's-
constituents? Yeah.
There's a lot of issues that drive costs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And drive rates.
Because there's a disparity
But
here.
that's also the result that Miami-Dade County
Mm-hmm.
is one of the largest utilities. I think it's number 3 or number 4
Mhm.
in the country. So they have a larger customer base.
Mhm.
And you're distributing costs among a larger number
Mm.
than you are the 58,700 or the 59,000 that we have in the city of Hialeah. And the same thing applies to the other cities. Now, are we comparing apples to apples? We think we are. But the comparison doesn't take into consideration, at least in my mind, levels of service. Garbage is a good example when we went through the solid waste exercise of privatizing that service. The ongoing financial obligations of the system being a smaller scale system, and does not factor in to offset those costs, the benefits that the system has provided to areas like the annexation area and that new development. So that's not part of the analysis, that's not part of the study. But for the most part, we believe that the comparison is accurate. Any other questions? If you continue through the book, you're going to get to a table. You continue to flip. You're going to get to a table that talks about 2020 CAFR. You'll know what the CAFR is, with revenue reductions. That's an analysis that the mayor asked me to do. The mayor and I had a conversation, and he said, I want you to look at different steps of rates. See if we can do a 5% reduction. See if we can do a 10% reduction. See if we can do a 15. See if we can do a 20. And we did that. We ran the numbers with only one thing in mind: the bond coverage. And if you go through it, you see that a 5% reduction in rates, we still meet the obligations under today's conditions on bond coverage. We do not meet the conditions of bond coverage at 10%. We do not meet the conditions of bond coverage at 15%, and much less at 20%. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you guide me on where on the chart exactly it is that you're seeing that coverage?
Okay.
Is
You
it
you see on the
because it's
top-
a little
you see on
bit
the top-
blurry.
You see where it says 2020 CAFR with revenue reduction?
Yes,
You see that it says original,
right?
and then over it says 5% reduction,
Yes, sir.
10% reduction, 15% reduction, 25% reduction.
Yes.
I want you to go all the way down to the last line,
Okay.
all right? Difference. You see where it says on the left, difference?
Oh, okay.
DIFF?
That's- Got it. Yes,
And then that's what it means.
got it. All right.
Okay, that's
Thank
what
you
it
so
means.
much.
Now, the reason I'm emphasizing this is a picture in time is because all of you know that we're going through the process of refinancing this bond. And depending on the terms we get from the bank as we refinance, bond coverage may change. Okay? We don't know what that bond coverage today is going to be. We don't know what that's going to look like. But given the conditions we have today and our obligation under the bond document, you can look at a 5% discount, but not any more than that. That doesn't take into consideration what the county is going to do, right? That doesn't take into consideration what CPI is going to be. And we're not going to know that until June, July, when we get the true-up analysis and the wholesale rates from Miami-Dade County. And that's what's going to allow us to finalize our budget this year. Go ahead.
Question for you. The 5% discount, that's excluding the franchise fee when you did your
That
numbers?
excludes the franchise fees. That's a good question. That excludes the franchise fees. But we took into consideration a CPI adjustment of 7% when we did it, right? Yeah, 7% CPI. So in essence, we took the audited numbers, adjusted by 7%. We looked at the differential. We looked what the bottom line as far as operating revenues is concerned below depreciation. And then we came out with the rate coverage.
Sir, because I think what you're trying to tell us is we can give a 5, it seems like we can afford to give a 5% discount, but still the consumer, which is beyond our control, will see an increase in the near future because of CPI and other things, which is out of our control. So all we can do is offset it, but they'll still see an increase. It's not that they're going to get a 5% increase across a decrease.
I would caution.
Yeah.
All of you, we don't want to do it, to take the 5% to the bank.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm saying that is that we don't know at this moment what the county, these are estimates on our part. And we don't know what the county is going to do from a wholesale standpoint. We are not going to know until we see those wholesale rates in the June, July timetable. So when we go through the budget and we go through that discussion, And I hope that we have a budget workshop just like this, not only for water and sewer and solid waste, but for the entire city. We can address that issue because we'll have more information. Right now, we got a crystal ball and we're looking at a few months down the line. And we don't know what those numbers, based on the charts I show you, I know they're going to
It's
go
gonna go
up.
up, yeah.
We just don't know how much.
Right. Thank
Okay.
you, sir.
If you flip one more page, this is only for your historical value. Remember when we started this discussion, we talked about metrics, social metrics for the city. This is what Fish looks at. This is the last report we have from them, dated December 2021. And when we have our bonds rated at A+. And these are the bonds that we're trying to refinance at this point in time. If you don't have any other questions, I would like to then proceed to chapter 2 in your book.
Any questions? You're recognized.
This one. Yeah, sorry. So in this Fitch study here, so on page 5, it says, rate flexibility is strong with system charges affordable to about 75% of the population. So am I understanding that correctly in that it's saying 25% of the population doesn't find it affordable?
Where are you?
Page 5
Oh,
of
the
the,
Fitch
of the
report?
Fitch, yeah, the
Okay,
last
hold on,
one.
hold on a second. Okay, I'm there.
Yeah, so it's
Where
about.
are you? Where are you in the
Under
page?
revenue defensibility, paragraph 2, line 1, says rate flexibility is strong with system charges affordable to around 75% of the population.
That-
So does
that-
that mean the inverse, 25%, isn't affordable?
Remember, we talked about a 19%
Poverty
poverty
rate?
rate for the
right.
city. As a rule of thumb, Fitch on reviewing bonds has, and I said it to this council before, the rule of thumb that they take 2% of median household income. And that is their estimate of what the average consumer should be paying for water and sewer type service.
Right.
And that's what that means. Right. On chapter, any other questions?
Go on, sir.
Mr. President, I don't mean to run your meeting.
No,
I-
please. I need all the help I can get.
On section 2, section 2 is an interesting, if you go into that chapter, you're going to see a schematic
Yeah.
of the sewer system in the city. I want you to concentrate on the upper left-hand corner. And you're going to see, it's kind of hard to read, at least for me. Miami-Dade was 418. And what does that mean? Miami-Dade Water and Sewer has a pump station by Casas Park, 72nd and 33rd, I think it is, which is called Pump Station 418. A little bit of history before I turn it over to Carl to discuss flows. Forest Station 418 handled for many years flows from Hialeah, that part of the city, handle flows from Hialeah Gardens, Medley, and Doral. The county, a couple of years back, few years back, more than a couple of years, as part of their consent commitments, had to rehab 418. So they asked us to use our pump station 200 as a bypass to 418, and Carlos is very much aware of this issue. And no good deed goes unpunished. No good deed goes unpunished. The temporary connection was established. They rehabbed the station. Without getting into a lot of details, the station doesn't work. The county station doesn't work as originally contemplated in handling the flows that go to the station. As part of that exercise, we remove our flows from that station. Our flows go directly to 200. They don't go into 418. It was never contemplated that the temporary connection between 418 and 200 would remain in place as a permanent connection. The county took it upon themselves to keep that connection in place. As a matter of fact, when they certified the station, and we have gone through a lot of public records requests to go through the data, that permanent connection is not shown. But that permanent connection is there today. My first inclination was to disconnect it. There's no agreement. It's costing us money.
We don't need it.
No, no,
No.
they need it.
No, no.
We don't need
We
it.
don't need it.
But my good friends at Durham say, no, don't do it. And based on their advice, which I take very seriously, I haven't disconnected. When you talk to Hialeah Gardens and the engineers for Hialeah Gardens, they tell you they're still sending their flows to Hialeah. And that's costing us money. The county takes the position that they're giving us credit on the flows. We have done the analysis. Carl has spent numerous hours going through these flows, looking at historical data. We hire attorneys, putting in public records requests in order for us to get data. And we have analyzed each and every one of those. And we think they're wrong in the estimates. We believe that A, they either should disconnect from our pump station 200, or B, they should enter into a permanent agreement with us, giving conditions that would benefit the city. It's not Miami-Dade County Water and Sewer determining what they're going to pay the city and what rates would you charge. As a matter of fact, that's service outside the city. Many years ago, when Jack was still here, more than 25 years ago, Hialeah used to sell Hialeah Gardens water. There was a surcharge allowed by state statutes of more than 10% on that water sale. So now this is sewage coming back into Hialeah, taking your capacity. And the county decides to give us some kind of a credit. And I'm going to let Carl explain the flows, and then I'm going to discuss with you the monies and what I believe we need to proceed next. So with that, Carl.
Not the franchise fee, the sewer fee.
You, Carl, name and address for the
Carl
record.
Holzenberg, Milliana Swain Associates, 2025 Southwest 32nd Avenue, Miami 33145. So as Armando went through a minute ago, back in 2016, this pump station 418 was taken out of service. These flows were diverted to pump station 200, the city of Hialeah's pump station. At that time, we took a look at the flows, and of course, the flows increased into pump station 200 as they would since they diverted the flow. Yeah, the information is in the book, sorry. It's in the next page. You'll see talking points. So as we took a look at the flows in the pump station 200, what we noticed was the flows were increased, but they were increased more than 30% above the combination of pump station 418 and pump station 200 in the prior 2 to 3 to 4 years. So immediately that's somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000 a month.
Is this a result of development?
We
More
have no
use?
idea.
Wow.
What
okay.
we've done is, as Armando mentioned before, sent a public records request to find out, what the difference is. Armando also mentioned that Hialeah Gardens flows are part of that. We get a credit
Mhm.
each month for the Hialeah Gardens flows, but Miami-Dade came back and said to us, well, you're getting credit for that extra 30% in that Hialeah Garden credit, and that's not the case. That credit has not changed as a percentage in the past 5 or 10 years. So something's going on. We're not quite sure what it is, but that's the reason for the public records request, and we're doing all this analysis.
You want to ask one? You're recognized.
So what does it mean? What
Oh,
is all this?
Carl, is that for Carl?
He's going to answer my question.
Go ahead, sir.
No.
Keep flipping, keep flipping, one more page. Keep going,
I did, that's why I'm there.
keep going. What does it mean? After discussing this issue with Mayor Hernandez, the decision was made for us to hold back the differential in that meter of what we believe to be the overcharge to the city.
Hmm.
We
Brave.
have held back, if you take a look at this chart, we have held back approximately $17 million. The numbers are getting big. The numbers are getting scary. $17 million. I had Carl and recalculate those numbers and look at other options, and we can justify that a charge due to Miami-Dade County that we can pay is about $4.9 million, 4.865. That's the one in the circle. That still leaves an overcharge of $12.1 million. We haven't paid it. We're holding on to that money. We want the county to come to the table and discuss this with us. Otherwise, our plan had been based on our discussions with Mayor Hernandez to proceed to conflict resolution with Miami-Dade County, because the numbers are getting big. It has happened before. Okay? It has happened before. It has happened before. Several years back, right here, there's two individuals right here, Debbie and Carl. They're worth their weight in gold, even though Debbie doesn't weigh too much. They're worth. They did an analysis on the water side of the house, and they found an overcharge of $6.2 million, and we made the county aware of that. That staff in Wausau at that point in time came and met with us in their offices in Coral Gables at 32nd Avenue and Coral Way, and we went through the numbers. And they left that meeting agreeing that we needed to receive a credit, and we got the credit in our water bills.
The entire amount. that
The
was being
6 point something
disputed,
million
yeah.
dollars that was in question. Today, on the sewer side, we haven't been able to bring the county to the table. Maybe the mayor can help us with that. In order for us to sit down with the county staff, receive all of the numbers, all of the information we're requesting, historical data that we're being told doesn't exist, and maybe it doesn't exist, in fairness to them. So we can review it, and we can do the analysis. It may also take additional work. We're not sure where the flows are coming from. It may take us dying Doral as they come into the station, Hialeah Gardens.
Or dying the flows, yes, sir.
So we know
But we
what
had to
really
die.
is coming in and what's really going into 200. So it's a big issue that needs to be resolved. It's a big
A
issue. that
study.
needs to be- And I just wanted you to be aware of it.
Just,
Sir. Yes, Mayor.
Mr. President, so this obviously, this 12 million is, I would imagine that the county would perhaps dispute the fact that we feel that there's a credit on our charge, and not to argue whether we do or we don't. I'm going to take the information at face value. Armando, I've also heard from the county on separate items of a claim that we owe them money. And so, to me, and one of the things that I would hope to do, and if it didn't happen today, at some point, we have county folks here, because at some point, this board is going to need to understand and reconcile. And as I said in the last workshop, and I'll say at the next workshop that we do, you know, the mission here is to respond to what residents, I'm sure all of you are getting, like I am, where it doesn't matter where I go. It could be at the grocery stores, it could be at, you know,
at Home Depot or putting gas, somebody is gonna give a passing comment of, oh, hey, do something about the water, oh, hey, the water, the water. I had a gentleman in my office yesterday with the water. And so obviously the political pressure is there to do something with regards to water. And I think what Armando is kind of showing us is areas that perhaps without doing an impact to our bond rating, is areas that we could look at that could put, positive revenue to this side that could get translated into some sort of a discount, credit to the user, right? But understand this is also full of landmines because like I said, the
Mhm.
county in conversations that I've had has have said, well, you guys owe us all this money, and it's almost like we have to reconcile this at some point. What do you owe us? What do we owe you? And where's the cut in the middle, right? So just wanted to make sure that
And that's a fair statement from the mayor. Um, But I don't want to commingle the issues. Uh, The issue of 418 is independent of the other issues that you were referring to. Before there was an overturn of the staff in Wasa, that was one of my conversations with him, is let's segregate the issues. As a matter of fact, Jose Enrique and I discussed that on the phone. Let's segregate the issues. Let's resolve one issue at a time, and let's get it behind us. Uh, because the numbers, at least on 418, are getting big. And we believe, on my side, and I'm only talking for my side, we believe that we're 100% correct. We believe as a matter of fact, we're adamant about our analysis on that.
and Armando, but just to cover ourselves, the money that we believe is a credited number or should be a credited number to us, is that stored away someplace?
No. The,
Ah.
the number that is stored away someplace is the $5 million that we believe they're due. No, no, that's not in any account that we've been putting away. All right.
Yes, ma'am, you're recognized.
You had said that at one point we had disconnected 418 to the 418 from Miami-Dade from the R200, correct?
No, Miami-Dade needed a bypass,
Right,
okay, in order for them to dry up the station and work on the station.
correct.
So they took all the flows going into 418,
They asked them
including
to
the
do-
Hialeah flows that used to go into 418, and put them in 200. That temporary connection has become a permanent connection. And that's the point of what we're trying to say.
Sir, did you say that 418 is still pumping, not at the capacity you said, but it is still pumping towards 200, R200?
418 is sending flow to 200.
Yes, sir.
That's the issue. That's what makes that delta that we're talking about, that differential we're talking about
Yes, sir.
on the credit and the argument on the credit.
Yes, sir. Thank you for reminding me.
All right, let's go to section 4, if you don't mind, please. Section 4 deals with the Durham agreement and the Durham consent agreement. You should remember that the consent agreement with Durham came about as a settlement agreement between the city and the county for the issuance of non-authorized business tax receipts in moratorium areas in the city. After a lot of months of conversation, meetings with county mayor, at that point in time, Carlos Jimenez, a meeting with Commissioner Bobo, and kicking back and forth the settlement agreement. We reached an agreement January the 30th, 2020. There are 3 elements to the agreement, 3 important elements to the agreement. One is the issue of compliance. There's 101 businesses that were identified, and you should remember that discussion in the audit that we did citywide, citywide, uh, of the businesses that were not compliant or were given licenses to operate in these areas. And I would like to ask Lorena Bravo, the city attorney, who's overseeing the issue of non-compliance and has been working with these businesses to address the point of non-compliance. Lorena?
Hi, good afternoon,
Hello.
everyone.
Good afternoon.
It's good to see you on this side of the dais. I placed just a quick pie chart and the exhibit from the consent agreement identifying the businesses right behind it.
Madam Attorney,
Yes.
should you identify yourself for the record?
Sure.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Lorena Bravo, City
Thank
Attorney for
you.
the City of Hialeah.
We forgot who you were. for a second.
501 Palm Avenue.
Thank you, ma'am.
Unless you want to.
Good. Thank you, ma'am.
So I think, a picture speaks 1,000 words. I just wanted to let you know that we have worked with all the 100 businesses on the exhibit in order to bring them into compliance. And, the effort has been a collaborative effort with, spearheaded by our licensing director, Yesenia Gruich. She's here in the audience to address any specific questions on any one of the businesses on the list. And members from our building staff who have been dedicated to shepherding the applications and questions and requests made by each of the businesses that we have met with. And so, just to go over it quickly, our goal in compliance was to assist these businesses by helping them understand what the specific violations in each of their locations were and creating specifically for each one of the businesses who has participated in this compliance effort a corrective action plan and defining deadlines for each of the actions required of them. They have all, those who have met with us, and basically 31 of the businesses who are in this process of actively seeking compliance met with us, retained design professional, and have submitted plans, whether it's an application through our zoning department to make adjustments. You've had a few of those applications come before you, or the process plans to correct the violations.
Ma'am, can I ask you something? This has nothing to do whether they're out of moratorium or that these are like change of use that they never did or other things having to do with the actual
So
building.
the nature of the violation basically involved one of two or both.
Mm.
As Mr. Vidal explained, the problem arose because the department was issuing temporary licenses for businesses to operate, and they were out of compliance with Durham requirements. It was either because they were in a location where they could not connect to a pump station because it was in moratorium. It could not accept any additional flows and process those flows. That's a capital improvement problem that the business owner would not have resolved and shouldn't have begun to
Right.
operate at that location. And then other types of violation involved the grease trap permit requirements of Durham, where they had established operations and had not complied with that program, or obtained some other operating permit that would have generally been identified as part of an application for a license. As a result of the consent agreement, the first thing the city was required to do and did from the licensing perspective was to modify its process of reviews for licenses. And so previously, an applicant would come in, submit an application for an occupational license, and basically just address the zoning review and the fire safety review. It would not be reviewed by our building staff. And so there was no opportunity for our own building staff to identify whether the location itself was in compliant with building permits. Then on a disjointed basis, the applicant would go to the water department and submit an application for an account. And there was not a review to determine or a communication internally to determine within the departments whether the use had been established and any connection fees have been paid, a study on whether, what capacity they required in terms of sewage disposal. And, our department engages in that review in order to ascertain compliance with the regulations set by DERM. In addition, the county has an opportunity to review those applications for their own internal regulatory compliance purposes. So our process before was fractured, and it allowed this opportunity for businesses to begin operating or continue operating when they were not fully compliant with all applicable regulations.
Got it.
And in addition to that, if you add the fact that the department was giving them temporary licenses in hopes that they would, through operation, be in a position to fund and sort through these regulatory issues, that they would then normalize or correct their deficiencies. And so, we were penalized for, in essence, sanctioning an operation that was in violation of
Through the
DERM
chair.
So as Armando had said earlier, no good deed goes unpunished. I thoroughly believe that the intent
Yeah.
was to try to help, because, with all due respect to Carlos, who is, I would tell you, probably one of the most accessible folks you're going to find at Durham, who then actually tries to help people. The reputation of Durham in most of the civilized world, okay, is that they are anti-business, that they make it very, very difficult, okay? But they do have a critical role to play. And we have to respect the role that they play, because they are in charge of making sure that the water we drink in the future does not make us glow at night. So saying all that, the question I have is, was the consent decree, and this agreement limited to these 100 something businesses, or did it become global now, where any business that's opening in Hialeah is not going to be able to move forward unless Durham has already checked off a box?
Well, that wasn't a change. That was a requirement always.
Right.
And so, in fact, we had Durham staff. I forgot to mention that our review before required Durham's review and approval. And we had Durham staff prior to the pandemic in our second floor to provide this service to applicants.
So I remember being at the county and having this discussion about wanting to make sure, I don't know if you might remember it, Carlos, we, every city should have a Durham representative there, because, in the real world, outside of this bubble that we live in, where somebody's trying to open a business, what they run into is just a hurdle after hurdle after hurdle of government-created programs and rules and regulations, all well-intended, no doubt about it, but what literally, you start, I'm going to open a business, and it'll be 2 years before you open that business, okay? And so here's an area where I know that I've discussed this with my staff about, where technology should be a bridge here, so that when somebody's applying, Durham is getting information at the same time, the county, whoever needs to sign off is getting it at the same time, so it starts moving it. Because what ends up happening in many cases, and I learned this while I was in the private side also, is that, there's an application here, you got to get something approved, you got to go walk it over someplace else, you got to sit and wait, and it's just, this is why people decide, the heck with all this, I'm just going to open a business out of my garage and be done with it, which is something we don't want, right? Ultimately. So, to me, there has to be a way where, get Durham back in here, which I think that should happen. Yeah, I don't see why we have to delay on that. And then the other is, let's hold ourselves accountable to get technology in place here that helps make this quicker, cuts time from this, from the moment they go into our license department and they press a button, building and zoning and everybody else that needs to get in at our end, and the same thing happens at Durham. For God's sakes, I'm sure there's a 15-year-old someplace that's already built this app in the garage of his home that's already ready to lay this thing out. And I think that's where we should be looking at, because if not, we're going to be living with this reality. And like you, I also get folks that come up to me and say, yeah, I want to open this business. I'm just changing the use of license, or they've been selling flowers here forever and I just did a change of business and I still have to wait 4 or 5 months, whether it's exaggeration or not, folks. That's what we hear, right? And these are the things I think that we need to start addressing in order to make it easier for businesses to open their doors.
Through the chair,
Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Loretta, on this current numbers, has the green increased or this has been stalemate? How's as far as being legal?
Well, so
Compliance.
this is our first review from, after we met with the businesses to begin, enforcing. Basically, the enforcement required under the agreement was we needed to put everyone on notice, give them 6 months to come into compliance. And I believe that the greater majority of the 46, you have some who had complied and some who basically ended up closing down, which we consider to be compliance, because there is no use continuing, or the use that was in existence at the time, which was the subject of the agreement, the enforcement part of the agreement, is not existing there at the time. And in conjunction with the changes at the department and internally at the city, we now know that no approval should be issued for any uses coming into those vacant locations that do not undergo the review that we put in place to make sure that all the requirements are met with.
So out of these, let me see, 45, 54 future, how do they look? I'm just curious. How's that world for them? Are they going to be able to be in compliance, Mando? I don't know though. I'm just curious about that.
So the 46 are already in compliance.
Yeah, the
The
other side.
30, that left us 55 businesses.
Correct.
One of the businesses listed on the list should not have been there. It does have a DERM permit. We have or will speak to DERM staff and identify that. So we really have a population of 100 businesses. And if you look at the chart, we're close to achieving 76% compliance. You have 46 businesses who have complied and 31 businesses who are actively working towards compliance. I met with every one. I and staff met with every one of those 31 businesses and created a corrective action plan with sufficient time built in, so that, it would be fail-proof.
Okay.
They understood, and certainly the businesses recognize that these are issues that they have the burden of addressing. Now, within those 31, there were a few businesses that were in areas of moratorium. The
Yes, sir.
agreement reached with the county is the other half of the agreement is when the city completes those capital improvements within the agreed approved time, then these businesses will no longer have an impediment to obtain a license. But that required DERM's approval, and so those businesses were required to go to DERM and enter into their own consent agreement to allow them to continue in operation until the department corrected those capital deficiencies. All the remaining 31 locations involved different types of operating permits that they needed to get at DERM. Some of them involved basically building permits. They may have already obtained a DERM approval or a DERM operating permit, but the agreement under the consent agreement was that this is the population that we needed to audit. And through the audit, we uncovered businesses that may not, as of the date of the consent agreement, have had a DERM violation, but through the inspection, we did uncover building violations. And so that generated a violation for the business that needs to have those addressed.
So more headaches for them.
Excuse me?
More headaches for them, Napoli.
Through the chair.
Yes, ma'am, you're recognized. Are you done, Louis?
Yeah, I'm done, I'm done.
Go ahead, ma'am, yes.
On this list, were there businesses that have been established a long time that are on this list?
That's what I'm looking at too, yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
I'm curious
Some of the
why-
colors
why
are
they
like,
would be
yeah.
in moratorium if they've been open for as far back as I could remember.
It's
Yeah.
not my understanding that the businesses were in operation for a very long time with a license. We would have not identified them on this list had they had a permanent license. And to address the mayor's concern, we are heavily paper-based. At some point, Durham was also heavily paper-based. As a result of this exercise, we have reached certain agreements as they call their records and we call our records. In fact, there was a county audit that basically recognizes that through collaboration and these technological advances that they have implemented and we have agreed to implement, we should have a more comprehensive understanding about which businesses are in compliance and which are not. And so we have about 20 to 25,000 licenses that we renew on a yearly basis. And the city, thanks to its paper records, was able to to establish for the majority of the businesses in operation a DERM seal and stamp as part of its application. Because it was not a digital or electronic record, we actually had to, I think we drew a line in the sand in time and with Durham. It may have been 1990, 2005. Any business who was licensed, permanent license through the city in 2005, we basically agreed that it was presumptively operating in compliance with all regulations. And so those businesses basically renew through our standard process. In our renewal process, we inquire whether there are any changes to identify whether any changes to their operation, increase, expanded size, occupation, or tenancy, whether that would generate an additional check to run through our departments and verify that they didn't do construction without a permit, that they're not increasing their sewer outflow, and that they do not require a DERM operating agreement. And so from 2005 forward, we have also been calling our records and sharing with DERM any business for those DERM approvals. And so if you have a new business come in today after the consent agreement, we modified our process. Now, and at the mayor's behest, we've actually implemented a pre-application process to help those businesses sort these issues out. But if you come in and apply, your application will be submitted to the license department and submitted for reviews to zoning, building, fire, DERM, and finally to Mr. Vidal. There's a connection where Mr. Vidal is no longer opening accounts without having an understanding that everything else is in compliance with. It's part of doing business in Hialeah today. That's still paper-based. And, there's some data input into our proprietary system. Part of the agreement required that we digitize our process. We did enter into a contract with a contractor who's also creating a system for us to process our building applications. And eventually we will have different modules in our development department so that they are all digital and have a database of information that communicates with each other. Yes, it's Tyler. Tyler Technologies is working with our building department, and Tyler Technologies is working with our license department, because part of our agreement required that by 2024, we have a digital system where the county is going to be provided viewing rights to satisfy their need to audit our performance and our compliance. Right now, we do it on a paper base. Every month, we report to a DERM our approvals in arrears for the prior month's activity, and we submit those reports on a monthly basis. And so far, we have not received any items of concern. We have a great collaboration, and we address those concerns as promptly as we identify them. But if you have any questions about compliance, we are basically looking at 9 businesses that, despite having met with them and created an agreement, a corrective action plan, they have refused to even take the first step in that agreement, and we will be taking additional enforcement action.
Was the money that these businesses paid, the previous council refunded the money?
Yes, sir. I think it was to the tune, they approved a reimbursement to the tune of $230-some thousand, but not everyone sought their reimbursement, sir. We met with each of those businesses who came in. I think it was probably, we ended up reimbursing under 100,000. I'm gonna have to check my figures on that.
Okay.
But, we adopted a resolution, we sent out notices, we met with a lot of the owners, we had checks drafted for them. Not everyone came back for those fees, sir.
Interesting.
They must be part of the compliance. I have not correlated the information of reimbursement and compliance, but I'd be happy to do that.
Anyone else? No? Thank you. Thank you,
On
Madam
this,
Chair. Oh,
before we, I think Durham is going to be next, but before we get to Durham, I want to ask you, Armando, a question. You were showing charts earlier that showed the usage of water and sewer. When I'm washing the car in my house, maybe that's not a good example. When I'm watering the lawn in my house,
Me neither.
When was the last time you?
Hypothetically.
I don't remember. I got kids in my house
I know
to
you
do
gotta
that.
tell me.
I got kids to
I
do
know,
that
that's
in
why I'm
my
asking.
house. I like supervising. I like supervising, but when I'm watering the lawn in my house, okay, am I paying sewer for that use?
Depends.
On what?
It depends if you have a sprinkler meter or not. It depends if you have a separate meter.
No, I
No,
open
no.
the hose.
You are
No,
paying.
You're
I'm
paying.
paying sewer
You
for
are
that.
paying. If you open the hose at your main bib on the house
Mm-hmm,
and it goes through the meter,
mm-hmm.
just like I do in my house when I water my plants, you are paying sewer.
Yep. You're paying both. You need a
Paying
sub-meter.
water and sewer, even though you're
Because there's
not.
no separation. There is no separation on the entrance of the water to the house.
So does the,
Sprinkler requires equipment. Sorry, sir.
do we have a program that offers for folks to be able to, whether it's to purchase from us, to do that
We
separation of meter?
Yes, sir. We have, you can come in and get something called a sprinkler meter, which is the same thing.
Mhm.
It's just a separate connection with a backflow preventer to protect the system. But you pay for the installation of that meter, and then either for sprinklers, whatever, washing the car, even for filling the pool and everything else, even though we got pool credit, you can use it without paying sewer on that meter. Yes, sir.
Because, we
awesome.
hear and I know we've talked about maybe doing monthly billing so people could adjust their budgets accordingly and what have you, but, when you hear an older couple, kids are gone, and they're complaining about their water and sewer bill, even though we do point out to the sewer use, I'm just wondering, how many people, como se entretienen, putting water in their home, watering their
They
plants.
could
and all
benefit from that.
It's a game changer.
I do that. Yo me entretengo haciendo eso.
Is that what you do? Yeah. After a certain age, I want you to know, because it happens to
yeah,
me
man.
too. It happens to me too. And I just wonder,
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
Avenue,
is that
we
expensive?
still water the dirt off the
Yeah.
sidewalk.
Before I turn it over to Carlos, I want to refer to, I want to make 2 statements. One, regarding Lewis's concern about new businesses. The audit that we did, when I reported this case to Durham, over 101 businesses that we were dealing with. That was the final audit. And there's a big, thick study that we share with Durham on the 101 businesses. But we find businesses as we go along, maybe a handful, not many. Durham has never, ever, in any of those businesses, been reluctant to help. Carlos has always been willing, and he's always open to issue consent agreements to those businesses. They send an inspector out, they see what the conditions are, they verify the information that we're providing to them, and they put those businesses on consent agreements until the city finalizes things. So, yeah, the number may increase slowly, maybe 105, maybe 106, maybe 110, but Durham works with us hand in hand in issuing those reports rather than taking enforcement action and saying to the city, hey, you got to take Lewis's restaurant and come down. That has never happened.
Okay.
I'm absolutely sure we understand that.
Thank you for that.
And as a matter of record, you did not keep track of what I was doing. I overlooked chapter 3, and it deals with lining, but it fits right in after we finish the Durham. So Ana Garcia will be making that presentation
sir.
on lining when we finish. Carlos?
Armando. Carlos Luis Hernandez, Miami-Dade County, Durham, 701 Northwest First Court. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members, for allowing us to be here and participate. It was an education listening to Armando on all the numbers regarding the fees and all that. It's quite interesting because we don't always see that, and it's good for us to understand that. I did want to just mention real quickly, there was a comment made about connection charges, and I did want to point out that connection charges don't come to Durham. We never get connection charges. And I know that because very early on when I went to go work at Durham and I left the private sector, I went to work at Durham, I got into this argument with his attorney that he was super confident that he had paid us $30,000 and that it was unfair that he had to pay Durham $30,000. And I kept on discussing with him, explaining to him that we never connect, we never get any of those fees for connection charges. And he was confident it was, but eventually I said, please look at the check, because he got the check back and look at it, it says Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Department. So all the connection charges go to the utilities, and what the utilities generally do with it, or what they're supposed to do with it, is as flows increase, is use that money to improve the regional system. And so that's, you're paying your percentage of the regional system to address. So if you put a gallon in, you pay $8 or whatever that fee is, it goes to the regional system to improve it. It doesn't go to Durham. So very minor issue, not significant, but I thought I'd point that out. So regarding the consent agreement, I do want to make sure that that I state few things about it, and thank you for Lorena and Armando for making great presentations and being very accurate in describing what we do and what we don't do. But I do want to make a point that the consent agreement was written, and I was one of the main architects of that. It was really written for the benefit of the city. It's not a punitive thing, right? And so sometimes consent agreements have that kind of connotation that it's a punitive thing. And it was really for the benefit of the city. And when you think about the benefit of the city, you think about its residents and the businesses. What it allowed us to do is and I was the first one that reached out to the federal government, and I said, look, we have this situation. This has happened. And the last thing we want to do, and the last thing anybody wants to do, is shut down a business. We want to find out a way that we could let these businesses continue to operate in a way that makes sense, that's within the regulations, but shutting them down is not an option that we want to pursue whatsoever. So I just want to make sure that the county's not going to get sued or have a problem with the federal government, whether it's the state, the federal government, or when I say federal government, I really mean EPA and DOJ, so Department of Justice. So they agreed that it made a lot of sense, that we work together with the city, and we promised them that we would enter a consent agreement, and we put the conditions in there to help the residents and the business owners move forward. And so every item in that in that consent agreement has great benefits. In fact, I would go as far as say that if there wasn't a consent agreement, everything in that agreement you would want to do regardless. There's nothing in there that I can think of that you wouldn't want to do on your own, even if we were not here today. So, and I won't drag on about that, but I could talk about that for hours, but I won't. But there's only good stuff in there. Like, for example, Armando's working diligently for many years. It's not an easy process to maintain a system and bring it up to solid operation, dealing with all the possible defects and all the things that happen and things that are put into the system by the users. And it's a complicated process, and Armando's done a great job of continuing to try to improve that process. And every time you improve it, And every time you get rainwater out of it, and everything you do to improve that system helps the businesses, it helps everybody out, and it reduces the cost overall of the operation of the system. So those are things that are highly recommended. So again, the reason we were able to enter a consent agreement with Hialeah was we got the support of the federal government, and that assurance was provided through our collaboration with the city. And a few things that the mayor said, I want to echo what was said about, we're still dealing with paper to a certain extent, almost done with paper. Why should you come and apply for a permit in one place and then start another process in another place? It is really difficult, and it's something that we tried to fix for years, and we tried quite a bit. And I'm proud to say that probably 20, I don't know if it was 2008 or 9 or 10, I forget, Frank, when it was. We came and met with the city and said, how can we make this process easier? And that's how we got someone in here, right? It was a combination. I can't take a lot of credit for it. The city really wanted to do it, so we agreed. We came in, we met with their staff, and we created a position here in this building. Right when you get out of the elevator, you can't miss us. And so that was put in place because we recognized that it was important to be as close as possible to our customers. And to what Armando said, I've worked in the city for a short period of time, and I can tell you, I don't disagree. I agree 100%. The municipal side is kind of where the rubber hits the road, right? That's where that intimate relationship with the customers is most vital. And so we initiated, we started that office, and I think overall it worked really well. But I think now we have the opportunity through technology that we could be everywhere, right? You could be everywhere and not have to be there, still be there. So I think we need to kind of work together to get us there. I think we're not there yet, but we need to have those systems in place so it makes it easier for a business to open. Together, right? We need to do a lot more. We're not there yet. It's difficult to open a business, and I don't know how sometimes people do it. It scares me to think what they go through sometimes. And it's not because what they have to do is difficult per se. It's the process. It's more process than anything else. So if you're opening up a restaurant, you got to have a grease trap. Well, that's not a big deal. But if you have to go through all these processes, you got to go to the city first, and then you start to process the city. And then you think you're good, and then you go to Durham, and then you got to come back to the city. That takes a lot of time and effort, and that needs to change. We need to have a more comprehensive system so that when you apply once, you get everybody's input. And something we did that we're very proud of, that we did with Miami-Dade Water and Sewer, and to their credit, in the old days, just to get a sewer extension, to be able to open up a business, right? So I want to open a business or build a new building. I need a sewer extension. Well, you go to the county, you'd spend an enormous amount of time just enter an agreement. By the time you got an agreement, you started going through a review process. Then maybe years later, when you thought you were done, then you found out now you need to go to Durham, which handles the state review, right? So all that was changed a few years ago, and now it's a concurrent system. So when you start that process for a sewer extension or a water extension, you go to everybody at the same time. And that saves a lot of time and a lot of frustration for everybody. So to the mayor's credit, why can't we do that with whether it's a business tax receipt or a building plan? It should be concurrent to the maximum extent possible. The technology is there. We got to work together to that end. With regards to the consent agreement overall, I have to admit, we've always had a good relationship with the city. I think sometimes it's overlooked. We've always had good communication with the city. It's definitely ramped up dramatically. I mean, I think sometimes it's hard to tell where Durham ends and where the city starts. And it seems like the staff is always reaching out to us, and we're always reaching out to the staff. You have great people here. It's amazing how dedicated they are and how consistent they are in helping the customers out. They really put the customers first. It's without a doubt. So they're always reaching out to me or Frank and other folks. And so we're committed to helping the city succeed and more importantly, the business to succeed. So as far as overall, if I have to say what's the status of the consent agreement, I think everything is going well. There's some challenges, no doubt about it. There's some challenges we talked about earlier. Was talked about. There's some businesses that are not quite there, right? And the way we structured it is the business can continue to operate as long as the city was doing their part and the city is doing their part. And then a few of the businesses that needed to enter a consent agreement with us because it's a moratorium issue related to the federal consent decree. Those we're having a little bit of an issue with, and we continue to ask for the city to kind of help those folks out to move along. And we'll continue from our end to reach out to them because we've really put together a plan that there's no reason for any business to shut down. It's just no reason for it. The procedures are in place, the criteria is in place for them to continue to operate so long as the city's doing their part and the city is doing their part, and I'm confident they're continuing to do it. So working together, kind of preserve those businesses, and with that, I'll take any of your questions.
Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. We, Carlos, we are evolving or using a platform, a computer platform. Tyler is my understanding. I don't know anything about it, okay? But my understanding is that our building department has it. We're rolling it out in license. And critical as one learns about all these technology is to make sure it can interface with your system. I don't know if you're the guru of technology there at Durham, but we need to make sure, and I don't know if you can make comment to that. Does our system interface with your system so that we could share information timely?
I'm not the guru of technology for sure. Maybe when I was 20 years old, I might have thought I was, but that's past. I have a 16-year-old that kind of, she's my guru. No, I remember our first fax in the office when I was at work. We were all amazed by this thing. It's critical that they communicate, and I know at the very beginning we set up some meetings between Hialeah IT and our IT, so they communicate and get the ball rolling in that regard. And there's sort of milestones in place so that those things do happen. That's the agreement was set up that way so that there's communication between the two sides to make sure that we don't have that like a gap and find out later on that we can't accomplish what needs to happen. But it needs to happen. I mean, I don't know if you remember the days where the way things used to be now. I mean, things are a little bit better now because electronic submittals and whatnot. But imagine you carry plans, bring them here, go there. I mean, it was a nightmare. I can't believe we would be able to do that, and that we should do that. But it definitely needs to interface. The better we do that for the customers, the better off we all are.
Well, I'll make sure from our end, I'll make sure and give instructions to our RT folks to make sure that they're working with yours. They need to have programs that speak to each other, because then if not, we're going to find that bump in the road where then something has to be printed again and all that. And while I think, I don't mind old school doing paper and having a paper trail. I think that's always for verification purposes, for filing purposes. I think all that stuff is wonderful. But that interaction, that connectivity, and make it user friendly for those that are applying for a license. I just think the world has evolved there, and we need to be there. And we're still way behind where everybody else is, at least where the private sector is. But I just think it's just going to make life a lot easier for that person. And always we got to keep in mind the person that's opening a business is all in. Okay,
All in.
They're all in, right? And so we can't be the obstacle or the biggest blockage to them being able to get their business open. So I'm glad that you're here. And again, I think we need a person here. We should have a good person again.
Absolutely.
Pandemic's over. I declared it already, so we could have a person. Actually, the President Biden.
Through the chair.
Yes, sir.
Question for you. Those established businesses that have not been in compliance, can they sell, or it stays with that ownership until they, how does the county feel about that? How does that work?
So if the business is not in compliance today,
Yeah, they've been around. Let's say we found out there's part of the area that they're going to be in compliance or in their plan. Can they sell ownership, or how does that? Or
sure. So if there's a business that's in the process of coming into compliance and somebody else is going to buy that, they change the ownership, we will continue that process with them. It doesn't just end there and that's it. It's done. It depends a lot on what the specific items are with regards to the non-compliance part. But let's say worst case scenario, which is a typical one, which is that there was a moratorium and that business can't be there, and we're working with them and we have a consent agreement, let's say hopefully we would have a consent agreement with that business and they're going to sell it. We would then have to enter an agreement with the following business, right? So we'll try, assuming they weren't expanding or doing something different, it was just simply an ownership change. That's something we could relatively easily do, so long as the business that's coming in, follows the same path. Where it gets a challenge is sometimes people sell businesses, and we see this beyond this list here, is they don't tell, and they don't tell them anything, right? So it could be something as simple as they were supposed to have an operating permit. This is one that I see, too often, which is frustrating. Is it's a restaurant. they haven't never been legal, and they sell the business, and customer comes in, we're like, well, you need to upgrade the grease trap. Why? Because you've never been in the system. You are now a brand new customer, and the system you have in place is older than me, and it needs to be upgraded, and that's the process. And they're like, well, but they told me everything was fine. They told me everything was okay, and that happens a lot, and it's very frustrating.
Okay.
But but other than that, I think it's so long as we transition, and they're willing to follow through, I think that's possible.
Madam VP.
Are we still like, I'm sorry, is the city also pretty much, actually, Loretta, is the city pretty much in compliance with that too? As far as not giving them a hard time when we want to sell, or? Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Madam VP, before we go on, can you cover very quickly for the old man to take a personal break? Thank you, ma'am.
How much time do we have?
4? It's 3:30 now?
3:30 now.
Yeah.
So how much time?
How much time?
Yeah.
All the time you need, ended in 10 minutes, we'll adjourn.
You wanna take a
Thank
10-minute
you. No,
break?
no, sir, I'm just here. No, how much time? What, this is scheduled till 5. Is that your question?
No.
Oh,
I'm just wondering how much time you're gonna give me, that's all.
now?
To finish.
Oh, whatever you need, sir.
Okay, you got it. You got it.
Yeah.
If you go to- We're gonna go back to chapter 3, to deal with lining a little bit quickly, but go to a few pages before you get to tab 5. When you go to, you're gonna see a report, that talks about consent decree activities, Durham consent agreement, February 1 to February 28. This is the paperwork that they're dealing with. These are reports that we send to law every month. Planning, building, license, public works. And law takes all that information, packages it up, and sends it to Carlos and the Durham staff. If you flip one more page, you're gonna see a table, which is green and yellow. Remember Lorena talked to you about making sure that properties that are connected are in compliance with Durham. That's what this table represents. Part of the settlement agreement and part of conversations that I had with Durham, the Inspector General, and others, we implemented an informal process to ensure that whomever is connected to the sewer system has a valid license, and B, they're doing so legally. So we established a window in our lobby for just commercial accounts. You show up, you fill out your application, you give us the paperwork, no action takes place. You got to go through a review process that we do informally between, and we keep records of everything. We got emails and papers in boxes. And we check with planning, we check with building, we check with license, and sometimes we check with Durham before we approve any change of use, any new account, any new connection. Because we took it upon ourselves to have the responsibility and meet the commitment we made to Durham and the county that this issue with licenses is not going to happen again. So I just want you to know that right now, it is a manual process, a lot of paperwork, a lot of notes. We keep all those records, and we look forward to the time that it will be automated. It will make it easier on everybody who's involved. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Ana Garcia. Yeah.
So I go to, if I buy a condo right now, and a business, I buy a real estate property.
Let's just say you rented a locale,
I purchased to rent it out, but I don't know who I'm gonna rent it out to.
okay?
And I go and I ask for a water account. So I could.
You're the
clean it
owner.
up.
You're the owner,
I'm the owner.
really? Look at the yellow part of the table. Look at the yellow part of the table,
It's
please.
tenant owner. Tenant owner, what color?
You see the yellow part of the table? Okay, those are owner accounts.
Owner account.
Owner accounts. When, in conversations with Durham, when an owner comes up to open an account, basically, if it's to clean it up, to prepare for rental,
Temporary.
to paint it, to do whatever you need to do in order to get it ready, we open the account for the owner. We show you on the yellow part of the table, and we ensure that that account is coded as a temporary account.
Got it.
And I put it on the paper. I do it personally, as a matter of fact. And it's written temporary account, 6 months. And they keep a tab in customer service. I hope they keep a tab in customer service to check these accounts every 6 months to see who's come up
Yeah, I went like
and
this quickly. by the
all
way,
right,
because-
and who doesn't. The accounts on the green portion of our renters, our people that come up to rent different businesses, and we're authorized to, after having all the checks and checking all the boxes, to issue the connection and allow them to connect. So that's the process, but all of it is being done manually. Okay? All right. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ana Garcia for the lining discussion.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Ana Garcia, 4000 Hollywood Boulevard, Hollywood, Florida, 33021. So the good news is I only have like 3 or 4 slides. So, okay, let's get started. So first off, we're gonna start with Mr. Vidal's favorite graph. So this is the system-wide wastewater flow reduction over time. So the x-axis that you see is time, and then on the vertical axis, you have flows, wastewater flows. So as you can see over time, that those flows have been reduced drastically. There's a little bit of an uptick in recent years, and I'll explain that. But that flow reduction is really as a result of all of the lining work that the city has done, investing over $18 million in the last 15 years. The last uptick that we're seeing, that's associated with the annexation area. So there's been some increase again in those flows. And along with the lining work, the city has also invested quite a bit in the last 15 years in pump stations and force main. We'll take a look at the map in the next slide. But it's been an investment of over $22 million in the last 15 years. And even more so in the last 5 years, we've seen about 17 million that have gone into the systems through a series of contracts. So that's what has been invested so far. In the upcoming work, there's still a lot of work to be done. So this map shows you, highlights some of the priority basins as well as basins of concern. Now, this work has already been bid out. There's 2 contractors that have been awarded this work, in Situ Form Technologies and Miller Pipeline, totaling over $15 million worth of work. And this is being funded through the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act. And there's some more work to be done. So this is work that I'm going to review now is work that hasn't been funded yet through ARPA or any other type of federal funding. This is the interceptor televising and cleaning. So as you can see here, you see the 2 highlights in orange or red. These are big interceptors, 48-inch and 54-inch, that transmit the flow via gravity to 2 of the Miami-Dade water and sewer pump stations. Those interceptors were originally put there in the early 70s. So they're the original to the water and sewer system. So they need to be televised to determine if there's any leaks or anything that needs to be repaired. Clean, because of course you likely have a lot of sediment at the bottom of them. And then there's also a couple of structures that go over the canals that also need to be inspected, just to make sure that everything is in working order. So all of that has a high cost. If we assume that about 35% of those interceptors need to be lined, the total cost is a little over $9 million. So it's quite a heavy investment. Some of these values have factored in some of the inflation and the shortage of skilled labor that we're seeing. But it's quite the effort. I think that's the last slide I have. Mr. Vidal, I don't know if you want to elaborate more, if there's any questions on the lining program.
Any questions?
So the two that were in red there, those are the ones that haven't been, but we've done other linings.
You've done a
throughout the
lot of,
past.
yeah, the majority, like I said, about 535,000 linear feet of lining have been done. A lot of those lines are 8-inch in diameter. There's,
These are like the most.
these are the large ones, yeah.
large-
These are the large ones. That's why, you see these numbers, these numbers to line, $500 per linear foot. I mean, when you look at an 8-inch line, it's more like $30. So that's a big price difference there. You also need to, when you're looking at these interceptors, you need to bypass, right? So when you're working on a segment, you basically have to divert the flow from
Correct,
one manhole
correct.
to the
To go
next so
through.
that you keep the system running.
Thank you, ma'am.
Finally, if we go to tab number 5. Tab number 5 are just some general items that I would like to make you aware of. The first item, you're going to see an agreement. I was explaining this to the mayor not too long ago, that we signed in 2001. This is a tri-party agreement between the FDEP, Miami-Dade County, and the city of Hialeah. What he basically says is that Miami-Dade County needs to operate, particularly at Station 307, which is one of the main points we connect to the county. It's right on West Second Court and 72nd Street, right behind the laundry.
Yeah.
Right behind that big building.
Mm-hmm.
And they must operate that station,
Oh,
the
yeah.
wet well of that station, at a given level.
Mark.
Why is that important? Because Anna was talking about the interceptors. If that level of water is allowed to go higher than a given elevation, the system can get in by gravity and start surcharging, filling up the
Mhm.
sewer system.
Not good.
And the system only has one way to go.
Mm-hmm.
You all remember what used to happen here years ago
Mhm.
on 12th Avenue and 54th Street.
Mm-hmm.
That's the result.
Through the man covers.
That is the result. of this agreement. This agreement has, I wouldn't call it pressure, but Miami-Dade County through the years have attempted to encourage me, excuse me, to give up on this agreement. Don't ever give up on this agreement. Don't ever give up on this agreement. These are the same words I said to the mayor. Unless other things take place, and we're going to be talking about that in a minute. Because this agreement protects the city. As a matter of fact, in the most recent case that Carlos and I dealt with, it protects the city. Because if you're able to prove by the data that the county has that they operated the station in violation of this agreement, it's very difficult for the FDEP and anybody else to take action against Hialeah, because our position is you, the county, cause that overflow. That's what the agreement is important. I just want to take a tangent and remember Palenzuela, when we're talking about Palenzuela? He had just graduated from law school, and he was the attorney hired by the city who was assigned to me, and he was the one who helped me negotiate with the FDEP at that point in time. And it took like 2 years, a little bit over 2 years, to settle on this agreement. So this agreement is important to the city. And I wanted to make absolutely sure that you knew about it. The next council must know about it. The council after that, the mayor after that, the mayor after that must know about it if it doesn't get changed. So let's move on. Go to the next pink page, please. There is 4 points throughout the city on the sewer side that we connect to Dade County. 2 of the main points are Station 307, which is a station right in front of the police department. And then, I'm sorry, 348, right in front of the police department. And then 307, which is the one we're talking about behind the laundry on Second Court. The county approached us in 2017 and attempted or proposed to us to take over those stations. We did an analysis of what was needed to bring those stations up to standards. And the numbers in 2017 were around $18 million. You're probably talking in today's dollars, $20, $23 million. And as part of, if you flip the page one more time to the next thing, and as part of the warning letter we got from FDEP in 2021, due to overflows that we had in November, heavy rains, overflows all over the city, we were able to prove with information we sent to the FDEP, I think a year ago in March, that the overflows were due to A, 348 having major electrical failures and surcharging our system, and 307 having electrical failures as well and being operated in violation of the agreement. We haven't heard from FDEP. Carlos and I had an informal conversation not too long ago. If I would consider taking over these stations for them to become a part of the city. And our position was we could consider it as long as there is a check of $20-something million attached to that. Why is that important? It's important to the regulators to know the line of delineation between one system and the next. Right now, because of the agreement and the conditions of us feeding by gravity into the county system, it makes it difficult to have that clear line of distinction. All you're doing by us taking over the station is basically we control our own. We control our own system. Of course, we would over-design the stations. We will make it so the stations can handle the flows and go to the next station, which is in Opalaca, I believe it's 1310, the booster station, as far as sending our flows, and let Miami-Dade County deal with those issues. The other position of that coin was what the mayor stated. When I briefed the mayor on this issue, he said, why do we want to do it? Let the 2001 agreement remain in place. And that's true. That's also a consideration that we need to discuss at some point in time. I just want you to be aware these issues are up there. These issues are being discussed between regulators and me. And there is no final decision as to where it's going to end up.
Yes, ma'am.
Those 2 stations that you've been speaking of, the 2 stations that,
The 2 stations that you were speaking of, the 348,
Yeah.
the biggest complaint the biggest complaint
Smell.
or the consistent complaint
Yeah.
that I get is when I go to Amelia Earhart and Hialeah Junior High. Oh my God, I just aged myself. Hialeah Middle School. That, don't laugh, that the smell is horrendous. The smell's been horrendous since I went to Hialeah Junior High because we used to go there to the little 7-Eleven there and the smell was horrible back then. But something needs to be done with those stations. Fine that we have the decree on the other side that it's the responsibility of Miami-Dade Water and Sewer,
But the residents that are inhaling that on a constant basis is the city of Hialeah's, not Miami-Dade County's. It's not incorporated. It's not, it's not unincorporated. It's city of Hialeah.
Reality
So-
of life. The
Correct.
reality of life is no matter how much deodorant you put down to control the smells, no matter how many auto control units you build on the station to handle the gases, you are going to get the smell.
I agree,
It's
but what you
sewage.
just said about the
It's
electricity
sewage.
going
And
on
at the end of the-
consistently.
At the end of the day, like the mayor's staff learned last Thursday, it is sewage. It smells.
I get that.
It sticks to you.
Remember, I get that
I know.
all day, right?
know, I
Okay,
know.
so my thing is that the reason we're having so much problems there is because electricity consistently goes out. And they have to consistently be, doing generators and being working, 24 hours, having them watch over it. So that was just, now that you brought it up, that was just my say on that.
And so I can get you out of here by 4 o'clock if you can. If you keep flipping the pages, you're going to get to a table that is has some colors in it. It's at the last of your book. You see it? And it's titled Underground Utility Contractor Damages.
Got it?
All right? Remember we talked about claims and contractors and communication companies hitting our sewer system and what happens? This is a matrix that we prepare months back that keeps track of the damages done by contractors to the sewer system. If you go to the last page on that matrix, which is about a half a page, you're going to see two numbers. You're going to see a number, total damages to date, $1.3 million, and still pending, $1.2 million. As a matter of fact, I got invoices, and I got pictures of the repairs, the emergency repairs for you on your own time to go through it. I got an invoice close to $300,000 or a little bit over $300,000 on an emergency repair where one of these companies hit a major line and Palm Spring Miles couldn't get out. Couldn't get out. And that's something that we deal with day in and day out. So with that, before I close, you allow me to close,
Your show,
I'd like
sir.
to make a couple of statements.
Yes, sir.
I caution all of us. I think it's fair game to talk about rates and costs and the county and the city and so on and so forth. But I don't believe professionally it's fair game to talk about water quality and question water quality in this community. I believe we need to be careful with water quality. Let me give you a little example. We work very closely with the health department. I wish they were here. We take over 1,920 samples every year in our system. Water is the most regulated water industry there is in the United States. For stage 2 byproduct, we take an additional 24 samples a year. We take lead and copper sampling. We're continuously sampling the system to ensure that we meet the minimum level or exceed the federal levels and the health department levels of water quality in this community. We work closely with Miami-Dade County. We publish a report every year that is a consumer confidence report. You get it in your mail. And in the back, there is a table that talks about water quality and how it's being tracked. So water quality is not a problem in this community. Has never been a problem. As a matter of fact, when we do a repair, I don't care if it's a 2-inch repair or a 30-inch repair. Doesn't matter to me. The protocol is very simple. You flush the system, you notify the residents, you do the repair, you disinfect the system, you take 2 tests to ensure there is no bacteria in the system. And while you're doing that, you flush the system to ensure that water continues to move in the system. People complain. As a matter of fact, the mayor and I had a conversation about a fire hydrant that was open. And that was because we were doing a repair within a block. And we needed to keep that water moving. And then after the repairs are done, we take 2 consecutive days of tests. I review those tests, and then that information is sent to the health department. And then residents are given a notice that the repairs have been completed and the system is safe to use. Because there is confusion regarding the rules. There is an advisory that we are required by rule to pass out every time we do a repair. And basically the advisory says, hey, we're doing a repair in such and such an area. It may affect your water. And if you want, and if you wish, you may go ahead and boil the water. And then the second action is a boil water order that I take. When the system is really affected, when the pressure drops below a given threshold. And I think you were here one time, we had half of the city.
Yeah.
Somebody closed a valve and the water didn't come in half the city. I had half
Correct.
the city under a boil water order for several days.
Mhm.
And that's more serious than when we do. All of them are serious, but the point I wanted to make is we take the repairs and the water quality and those kind of issues in the system extremely serious. And with that, Mr. President, Mayor, Council, I would like to close. I would like to thank you all for your time and your attention.
Would you allow questions if possible, Q&A real quickly? Just in case, I have to give my colleagues
What was that? I'm
the
sorry.
luxury. Anybody Q&A, sir?
Any questions that might?
Yeah, sure.
Anyone?
If you think about questions later on when you go through the information, you can either send it to the mayor. The mayor will refer it to me, or you can send them to me and I'll copy the mayor and I'll keep him informed.
Thank you.
And we can exchange information that way.
Thank you, sir.
We can do that. We've done that before.
Yeah, again, I think the challenge, there's still a couple of things that we haven't covered. And I think maybe one more, that'll be less time. But I think there's issues with regards to service areas, East Hialeah. I know it was in here, but.
It's in here, but I
yeah,
didn't.
I know
yeah.
because of the time factor. And also Hialeah Gardens, service areas that we may need to address. And these things, I think are important that we take in that information because it could help us as far as revenue that comes in. It could
Right.
help us in this space also. Just a reminder of the mission of why we're doing all this, not just for the sake of getting informed. Many of you may have already known this information, but I think it's important that we digest as much of it as possible. But we started this conversation with a mission of trying to figure out, is there a path that we could get a discount or a rebate or a program that could be created so that some in our community could apply for? You know, those, I think of those that are in fixed income that that just can't absorb the increase. How can we work with them? I do want to share a stat with you because I did talk to the property appraiser's office with regards to those that have applied for the extra homestead exemption. If you recall, state of Florida allows you an extra homestead exemption depending on certain qualifications, income, length of time at home. To my surprise, we don't have a lot of those in the city of Hialeah that have applied for that extra, homestead. We don't have a lot.
Exemption, yeah.
Because I thought if we use that as a path, you're only impacting a handful of folks. So, I would hope that if we, as we see this, especially as we go into budget time, if there's an area that we could work on this, that would probably be the time so that we could, dive into this, even give direction to grants to look at areas that maybe we could help. There may be water quality issues, EPA issues out there that could address water, discharge of water, whatnot, that there may be money we could grab to use it specifically in this space that could help, right? Conversion of septic tanks, although I don't think we have a lot, we may have some in the commercial areas, especially in the east end of the city. Is there state funding? Is there federal dollars that could help, again, dealings with the issues of water quality, that there are monies available for us to play and invest in this space that ultimately lead to a savings to the department? That savings then can be pushed back into the hands of the residents of our city. That's where I hope this stuff leads to in this conversation as we reconcile these other issues with regards to what we owe, what they owe us, as far as the
Right.
county's concerned. So I that's where I think the work is, members. And I would tell you, as administration, we're going to look at it. I'd rather collaborate with you, all of you, especially during budget time, so we can land this in a place that we could look, explore, and if it can't happen, then be able to speak to our residents with more clarity and understanding. Obviously, we cannot, in a soundbite, digest all this. And I'm not going to be the one that, oh, blame the county and that's it. This is complex. And so if there's things that we could do to help folks, whether it's monthly billing instead of bi-monthly, to help them plan for budgeting, I think it's important that people understand, and we deal with this transparently. Okay, there's,
Agreed.
I think we've seen already, there's nothing hidden here. There's no, pocket of money or barrel of money hidden away from folks. It doesn't exist. So we need to be very straightforward and transparent with people. And maybe there are questions of why does somebody pay less than we do here? And then how do we address that? And can we absorb it? Because whatever decisions we make that hit our bottom line, we need to be able to swallow it, absorb it, and then adjust budgets wherever we move forward. And we do plan. I mentioned to you that in the past that we are reconfiguring our financial operation and bringing in folks that are going to help us address this thing. I do plan to have budget workshops where we address this as a team on the issues regarding the budget, always understanding that your budget is probably your biggest policy statement you're going to make as a councilman or woman, because we're going to put our money where our mouth is, and where do we want money to be placed, whether it's police, fire, what have you. That's the budget time, is the time to do that. And I don't remember how it was done in the past. I know that what I want, the way I want it to be done now, is that it involves all of you intimately in this process, because all of you got elected, just like I did, with the same voters. They weren't different. And I think we need to be able to, to make sure that this administration, this government, is fulfilling the need that people are expecting of it. So service areas is something we still need to discuss. And I'd like to explore more. I don't know about you all, but I'd like to explore more about this segregation of metering that may be able to help some in our community as far as, water and sewer costs.
Agreed.
If I may, through the chair.
Yes, ma'am.
On April 30th, we had discussed, I had spoken to the mayor and to Mr. Vidal that we're going to be hosting the workshop on water and sewer with the We Lab. Is that a topic that maybe we could address? And maybe have a speaker there, explain that to the community, offer that as a service, and it still gives us time from here to April 30th, you think?
You mean at the end of April?
Yes,
That
sir.
will be up to the mayor.
I don't plan on going anywhere, so.
If we can offer that, and if we could offer just a part of the workshop and maybe get some information out there and sign some people up, if that's something they would like to do.
We could add that to the solid waste part.
Perfect.
Anyone
And
else?
can we
Oh, go
also
ahead.
discuss, on the next workshop, the issue with the flooding that we've had in the past when there's a lot of rain, just to clarify what those pumps are and what has happened? Because I know a lot of people that want to watch on YouTube that are residents that can't be here because they're working, want some clarity as to East Hialeah, why that occurs. And
Let's be careful with the terminology. Flooding or sewer overflows. Flooding is when the rainwater
yes,
remains on the street. Sewer overflows is affected by flooding, definitely affected by flooding, is when that water gets into the sewer system and then the sewer water has nowhere to go.
Well, the
So-
issue that
so
we
they
had,
go-
remember?
They go hand in hand, but they're two distinct issues.
The one that I'm referring to is flooding. Remember when we had the issue that we all had to drive around the city? There was heavy rains,
Right,
and I believe it was the year of 2020,
on November.
and it was all of East Hialeah, and it was massive rain that we got, but,
Massive rains.
Right.
And that dealt with that marriage of the two issues
right,
of rainwater, which is called runoff, rainwater having nowhere to go,
Mhm.
and people either opening manholes and or the water getting into the sewer system, the water not being able to go out because of the connection problems that we have with the county, and then the sewage coming out on the street
I
and
think-
contaminating the flooded water.
but correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't there an issue that the pump system was off by the county and they didn't turn it on
Yeah, but I
at that time?
I don't want to get into that yet. I still have that pending issue with the FDEP.
Okay,
I'd like for that to be either closed or resolved,
before we
if you
discuss
don't
that.
mind, before we get into
Okay.
any of those details at that point.
No, you know best. All right,
Anyone else?
that's it.
The chair?
Yes, sir. You're recognized.
Yeah, so I have a handful of questions. I wanted you to help me clarify, Director. So you were saying we have 58 or 59,000 water customers in the city, thereabouts?
I believe they're
59,000?
58,700.
Okay.
Is-
Got it.
Yeah.
So one of the main complaints that we get is, my meter wasn't read or, so I wanted to get some clarity on how that process works. I know we went over that in the last workshop in terms of the transition to digital metering. Can you please tell me, so how does that work on the bi-monthly system currently? How does that
Meter
look like?
readers go out.
Right.
They have a given schedule, and they do read the meters. They bring the information in their handheld computers. That information is entered into the system, and the bill is generated.
Got it. So how many meter readers do we have for the city?
Off the top of my head, I will have to check and get back to you. I would say
Ballpark,
10.
10 meter
In
readers?
that range, yeah.
Okay. And so that meter reader reads like how many meters a day?
It depends on the route.
Okay.
It depends also if the route, if the meters are in the back, in the
Right.
alleyway, because it's much more difficult to read than if the meters, like in the new areas, are in the sidewalk. It's just easy to just go by and walk and pop it up and take a look at it.
Right.
So it depends on the route.
So what is a route usually
The route is about 250 meters.
200 to 250? And is that like per day that you do a route or a route could be several days?
No, they may be routes with 400 meters in it, the way the routes
Right.
are laid out. So it could take them a couple of days or 3 days to read a route.
Okay. So, and the goal would be that in that 2-month period, right, those 60 days, that you would read presumably the 59,000 meters.
Urelis is in charge of billing.
Okay.
We meet every day. Every day we go through the schedule. Every morning when I have a staff meeting, we go through the schedule of meter readers, and we try to stay away at least a month of the readings. We get behind usually in the rainy season,
Okay.
and particularly in the summer when people start taking off time, we get behind on. We may get behind on those times.
So how do they do the meter readers like in the east part of town where, they are in the back of the property? How does that process work?
They walk through the alleyway, or sometimes they have access to the property. There used to be a time when we had keys. If somebody had a lock, we had keys to that lock. There have been times where we have to make an appointment. And Urelis can tell you there have been times where we have to go back to a property maybe 3 and 4 times in order to get a reading.
Right. Yeah, because I imagine a lot of those properties, they have moved the fence over, so there is no access currently.
No, the problem is not that much. It's not that. The problem sometimes comes in when the city for years has a policy of giving up those alleyways.
Right.
And the meter is a dual setup, and my meter may be in your yard,
Sure.
and I don't get along with you, and you don't give me access to the meter,
Right.
and that's very difficult. That creates a problem, and particularly creates a problem when there is when there is a repair that needs to get done. And my crews cannot have access to your property. And either we need to show up with police to get access to the property, or I have to shut off an entire block in order to find access to the property somewhere, somehow, where I can make the repair.
And how often are we seeing that happen?
Or I would say that that happens maybe once a month, once every 2 months in that range.
Right. So on that 2-month cycle, right, assuming that you're going to all these meters, how many of them are just completely inaccessible, that you're not able to
I don't know.
read the meter?
I would have to talk to my supervisor.
Well, do you have a ballpark idea?
No, you're asking me to speculate. I will not speculate.
Okay. Because I'm curious, and my presumption is that we read most of them. My curiosity is, if we were to transition to digital, would it aid in reading those that we aren't able to reach?
The obvious answer is yes. But we did a demonstration project several years back, and maybe it was the company we selected to do a demonstration project, and it didn't work. I went and traveled to a couple of places around the nation, and I saw automatic meter reading at work.
Okay.
It's extremely impressive, particularly when the units are sealed, and it prevents tampering with the units. And if anybody tampers with the unit basically shuts down and advises the system, and it gives you a flag that something's going on with that meter. And it would definitely help citywide if we were to transition to some kind of an automated meter reading program, or whatever you want to call it,
Right.
system.
Now, if we couldn't do it because it's financially too costly, what would you say we should be doing in order to ensure we have 100% of all meters read every month, every
Well,
2
I'm
months?
not sure. I'm not sure about that statement. I'm not sure that it's not financially feasible. It all depends on how you work out the financial package. But if we are to enter into additional debt, some of that debt service could be offset by the savings on the actual physical reading of the meters, and the additional revenue you're going to capture, which I think it was Monica had that concern, the additional revenue we're going to capture because the system is much more accurate than the manual system. So if you enter debt,
I'm sorry,
it's not going to offset the
just as a
debt.
clarification,
Yeah.
what do you mean that it's more accurate, the digital over the analog?
Oh, no, absolutely more accurate. That's not even a question.
Okay, but
That's not even
what
a
I'm
question.
asking is
I
how.
got to tell you got to go back. You got to go back, and one is you're dealing with humans. The other is you're just dealing with machines. SunPass is a great example. SunPass is a great example of what I'm talking about. There used to be a time where the tolls in 826 or the 112, Rickenbacker Causeway, Venetian Causeway, the tolls that were being collected. The county had a difficult time, and so did the state, in ensuring that 100% of the tolls were collected. As a
Right.
matter of fact, there was a major investigation in Miami-Dade County because some of the tolls were disappearing from Rickenbacker Causeway. So I don't want to go back to that history. But when you go to an automated system, it's a lot accurate. New Orleans started with something very similar, if you read the literature, to SunPass, the precursor to SunPass. And after the implementation of that system, I think they capture something like 99% of the revenue. So going to technology will be much more accurate than any manual system.
So do you believe that under the current system we have, we're not capturing the full 100% revenues?
It's not what I believe, it's what experience teaches you. It's not personal to me. It's what experience teaches you, that there is a human factor involved.
Right.
And when you eliminate the human factor and you go to an automated system, you're much more accurate in the collections on that system.
Is that where you would like to see the department heading into that direction?
If the finances work out, absolutely.
And if they don't work out, how can we augment what we have currently?
You would have to see what the package is. The only concern I have with the automated system is the speed that technology changes. And that's one question that, from an administrative standpoint, I haven't been able to get over. Maybe you guys can help me. Which is, you get into a 20-year note or a 30-year note to pay for a system that in 5 or 6 years may be obsolete. And that analysis needs to be made. Other cities have done it. New York is going through, maybe they started about 2 or 3 years ago, to an automated system. Cities in Colorado are doing that as we speak. Different type of automation, but they're doing that as we speak. Miami-Dade County Wasa hasn't done it.
Right.
And
Are there
they haven't done it because, I believe, because of the dollars more than anything else. They didn't. Yeah. But Hollywood has done it. Hollywood has is an older system, the city of Hollywood,
Yes.
but it's automated system, and it works well.
Are there any other municipalities within the county that have transitioned over to digital?
I think Cutler Bay did. I think Cutler Bay did also.
Yeah, I don't know.
Have a good manager.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I think Cutler Bay did it.
I don't know who else is doing it. I mean, I wanted to see big systems. I wanted to see what they did. Mayor Hernandez authorized me to go to a couple of places, and with AECOM, I was able to visit a place in Colorado. That system was amazing. In all honesty.
Do you remember where in Colorado?
Yeah, it's called Parker, Colorado. Just
Park?
outside Parker, Colorado, outside of Denver.
Okay.
And that system was ridiculously amazing. It was impressive. It's a seal unit. It goes in the vault, and the information it provides you is.
What you were saying about, I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
mean
no,
to
go
interrupt
ahead.
you. What you were just saying about changes, like, in 5 years, we're going to have everything absolutely new. I mean, we're going to start flying cars very soon, and we're, I'm still in my old car. But the fact, what we were talking about with the building department is exactly my concern. If we do something that's specific only for us, that's not gonna, in that company goes out of business, we stay with that without being able to fix that.
Well,
That
this-
happened in real estate when we automated everything. The company that was, everybody else was using, we said, oh, let's do ours special to us. And then nobody knew how to fix it after. So,
They're big companies that do this. They're
Right.
large worldwide companies that do this. And if
now
there
we don't
was
have to
an
reinvent
interest,
the wheel.
if there was an interest in seriously looking at this as an option, I suggest to you that you may consider one of our consultants in the pool to do a feasibility study and come back and look at these questions and give you a recommendation and look at the finances and tell you how we can finance it and move forward and what kind of an impact that would have. But I'm sure that that would be a tremendous improvement to our system to do exactly that.
Definitely think that's where we should be.
Yeah, my concern is that I think we have two major complaints right now. My colleagues can chip in. The complaints I hear are, number one, I got this high water bill. I went over to my meter. It looks like nobody's checked that in years. Obviously, people exaggerate. You get a flood and, I'm sure it'll get full of soil. I read a meter is not the same thing as somebody that's reading meters day in and day out. They have their techniques, I'm sure. My question is essentially, we know the route of digital, and we're probably going to have to go there at some point. My question is, today, is there any way that if we have, look, bottom line, I think 10 people is very little. If it is 10 people, very little for a city of our size. I mean, to read, to do it at a good pace, to ensure that we're providing, 100% service to everybody. So I'm saying it might be cheaper to just, budget in a couple more people within the meter reading, and using the system that we have currently to the best of our ability until we're ready to make that decision. And even when we do make that decision, as you've told us before, it's going to take a while. I mean, it won't be
I don't
one day to the next.
I don't know. I don't know about a while. I don't know what you mean by a while, in all honesty.
Well, I mean,
when we
how
looked at-
long can it take to do the entire city, 60,000 meter replacements?
When we looked at the Parker, Colorado system and the New York system, AECOM thought initially they could put the antennas for communications and the meters within a year. That's what Joey was talking about, within a year. So I don't know what a while means. I also have discussed before that, and that's why, at least in my opinion, I think to have somebody look at it and give us a feasibility study, that maybe we don't want to buy the Cadillac. And I understand where you're going, and I don't disagree with you. Maybe we don't buy the Cadillac. There are other automated systems that could help us. And I brought that up sitting on that chair the other day. Maybe there is all technology we can buy. Maybe you don't need an iPhone 14 or 13 or 12, whatever is out there. Maybe a 10 would do. And maybe a 10 can be that bridge, for lack of a better word, to the ultimate system. And you may not be looking at such a large expense.
Sure. But how do we, I mean, in a practical standpoint, how do we install those digital meters, let's say in the east side of the city, where it's now inside the property, like you said, and your neighbor's meter might be in the other person's, they don't allow permission, or,
You have to get access.
yeah, how do you gain that access?
Through the
We
chair,
have
that's
had
an
that
easement.
access. There've been times that
That's an easement. They have to let you
Yeah,
in.
I know they do. It's like
Yeah.
Florida Power and Light, but we have to obtain that access. We would
Yeah.
have to obtain that access. Look, if you read the literature, a lot of cities have gone through this transition. And a lot of cities, and like everything else, and any major public works project like this, some transitions have been successful, others have not. I can tell you that Philadelphia went through a very difficult time years ago making that transition. And I did not hear anything about Hollywood having any problems making that transition. It's a different system. I don't remember if Hollywood is a drive-by where there's only one person on a van with a computer and
Right.
they're picking up radio signals as they drive through the city. But I think we owe it to ourselves, if that's the direction we want to go, to undertake that study, to look at data. I mean, what could it take? 6 months? Maybe 9 months? To look at data and develop data that will provide us some guidance, will provide you as a policymaker some guidance as to where you want to go ultimately.
Have we ever done a test on digital meters within our system in the past?
We did once with a small company, I don't remember the name, out of Colorado,
Okay.
and it worked at the beginning. It worked at the beginning. And we tried the elderly routes, the routes that were more difficult to reach to.
Okay.
Um, and then all of a sudden, either that company went out of business, and we started having problems getting parts for the meters. So we scratched that program totally, and we haven't run a demonstration yet. Like I told you, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I went around and looked at other systems that could help us, larger systems.
So that specific study, I guess, whatever you want to call it, would you rate that as a success or a failure? That we would want to pursue that?
It worked. At the beginning, it worked. If it
Okay.
wasn't because of problems dealing with the company itself, at the beginning, it worked. But there are major companies that, in that technology. Yeah, Cooper City, yeah, and got rid of it. That was the same issue. I would say that would be the way to go, in all honesty. And let the study go forward. I don't know what the mayor thinks about it, but let the study take place. Let the study go forward. Let the study recommend a demonstration project where you take different routes on the program, and then at the end of the demonstration, you do an evaluation, and you make a final decision where you want to go.
Right.
And then you would know what the finances look like.
So when we were talking about the sewer lining program, started getting a couple ideas, and I wanted your take on them. So obviously, we're doing the sewer. We spent the $15 million, and that'll represent a good amount of savings. But my question is, what are we doing as far as the other side of the coin, which is the water going into the properties? What is our current state of maintenance, of I guess proactive work, other than repairs?
I think we're mainly on a repair and reactive standpoint at this point in time. The concentration has been on sewer because of the impacts that sewer has to the economy of the city. And the concentration has been, from a capital standpoint, in repairing the sewer system and bring it up to par. And the rationale is very simple. You don't have to be an engineer to develop the rationale. If you're within a given basin area that was built in the 1970s and X number of lines fail within that basin, you would have to assume, I think it would be a safe assumption to assume that the rest of the system is probably very close to that condition of failure.
Right.
So that would have to be, I think, the concentration.
But the 15 million that we approved and the lining that we contracted these companies for, I think you had told me it would take potentially about a year, 2 years in order to finish those projects.
Year to a year and a half, yeah.
Right. So at that point, aside from another basin falling into this area, would we be able to start looking at our water water
Supply
pipes,
lines.
supply lines?
We look at it. We look at it every year. We look at it every day as we go through it. When you complete, and you're never going to be complete. You and I went through that discussion. You're always going to have something to do in the sewer system. Always. Carlos and I have discussed this in infinitum, that you never get done because of the conditions, the environmental conditions that you're dealing with. But if the capital plan on the sewer side drops, where you don't have that high expenditure going forward, where you're just dealing or transferring into a maintenance mode type of thing, then, and assuming the ARPA funds continue to be available, then you can look at major improvements on the water side, like the automatic meter reading, like improving those things that need to be improved.
Right. So to get a little bit specific, the water, you said the sewer system, a lot of it was done in the 70s. The water supply lines, I mean, I guess it ranges obviously what part of the city we're talking about, but in the older parts of the city, how long have these pipes been there without being replaced?
Probably about the same. I mean, when you put sewers down in the ground, you usually do water and sewer.
Sure. And so
Uh,
what would be the life expectancy of those pipes that were laid in the ground?
You can probably 40 to 50 years, depending on the material that is used.
So we're kind of
You're
there.
there. You're there.
We're there,
You're
right.
there. You're there on both systems.
Now, is there a financial benefit to the city to fixing these supply lines? In terms of, let's just say they were leaking,
Absolutely. If you got a leak and you don't even know where the leak is, absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So,
Even though when you have a leak on a water line that is running at a 50 psi of pressure, you'll know immediately where that leak is going to be because the hole will be as big as this room.
yeah, because I see, for example, from the resident standpoint, you had a little flopper leak in your toilet, and it was the little pinhole, right? We've all seen the charts. So that amounts to thousands upon thousands of gallons in the period. If we just had a little pinhole in a water pipe underground, how much money is getting out
It all
there,
depends where that leak is too.
right?
You may have valves that are leaking, and that would be something that will benefit not only our system, every system nationwide
Yeah.
from an
Do
infrastructure.
we have
standpoint.
any valves leaking within
Yeah,
the?
we have a program that we change valves.
Do we
Absolutely.
do we know how many valves could potentially be
My
leaking?
crews know. My crews have they keep track of the valves that they need to replace
Right.
in the operations section.
Because here's my concern, right? Right, we're not buying the catalog. Let's just say we're buying the iPhone 10, like you analogized. If we put this iPhone 10 on a pipe that's 50, 60 years old, will there be any issues there? That's where I'm looking at it from.
I think they may be. Absolutely. Let's go back to sewer. I'll give you an example which is more scary than that. I had a failure, I believe it's 72nd Street between West 4th Avenue and Second Court as we go into Pump Station 307.
Okay.
The interceptor collapse. There were, I don't want to be quoted on the number, but let's say 10 truckfuls of rock that we try to fill in the hole, and the rock disappeared. He went into the hole. Wow. It took several $1 million, not only on the bypass, like I was talking about, to ensure that you take the water from one place and put it on the other place, just to do that 2-block stretch, to repair it and to line it. And that's why the mayor put in a request, and I believe you passed it, and you approved it, to go after federal funds in order for us to line those interchanges, those interceptors. Those are big lines, and that costs a lot of money. And if those lines, God forbid, were to fail, and they're right there at the end of their service life, I don't know what we will do with the water.
Yeah. So, listen, this is the second workshop. We've obviously talked about water a lot. When I just want to speak about myself. When I kind of am absorbing this information, I try to put it through a lens, right? A filter. And I wanted to ask you specifically, where you saw uh, success within the water department. How do you quantify? Do you sort of have a metric that you'd look at and say, the water department is doing well? It's not. It's in the middle. How do you quantify success for the department?
You can always do better.
Sure.
I don't think either you or I are perfect. and you can always do things to improve. But I think we have been extremely successful, particularly on the sewer side of the system. That's why I like that chart so much, because every gallon that I keep out of that system is every gallon that my residents or my customers don't have to pay. And I believe from a global standpoint, it behooves the economy of this city, if the city is going to be a viable city, given what the mayor talks about, his vision, what the city would look like 20 years from now, 25 years from now, to have that system resolved, because with the repairs we're doing, you are increasing the life of the system 40 to 50 years.
Right. And I think, so I outlined what I believe could be three potential goals, right, for the department, however you want to call them. And I think what you're saying fits into one of those, which is, I think the priority is being placed on the general infrastructure of the department, right? Lining, doing the capital improvements that need to be done. We obviously want to do as much as we can. So understood that there are, it's a give and take. I think there's potentially two other goals, and they could be in tandem or they could be in substitution of. I mean, that is, I guess, a decision for all of us to take. And I think so where we kind of came into this conversation, we're starting to frame everything in lowering rates. I think that's how we got to where we are now. People say water's too expensive in Hialeah. I mean, we see the charts where we fall in relation to other places. Obviously, if we're lowering rates and we're doing 5% discounts and what have you, I mean, that's less money towards infrastructure, obviously. And that's all fine and dandy. So that could be another goal. But then this is kind of like the other idea that I had. And I think, there's a little bit of overlap with infrastructure, but I think it's somewhat different. And it's the flip side of investment in our water department, which is, I guess, the customer experience. So anytime you call AT&T or whoever it is, you get a survey at the end, and they say, how would you rate your, are you satisfied, what have you? To my knowledge, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if we do that in the water
No,
department,
we don't do it.
but, just, this is totally ad hoc, but I feel like if we were to ask people to fill out those surveys, it'd probably be, on the lower end. So I don't know if this is in tandem to or a replacement of, but maybe that's where we want to point the spear, which is to improve the customer experience, whether that be through the meter readers themselves, right? Or the other half of it, which is what I wanted to ask you, is what does the customer service experience look like currently within the department? So, I mean, we've all heard it. You call the water department, it takes a while, but we see the lines outside. How can we help the water department improve that? Right? So that's what I'm trying to understand.
We have gone through all kinds of training on the customer side with the customer representatives. There is a certain, and I'm giving you all the data on payments and pie charts and everything else, and you know as much about it as I do. There's a certain percentage of customers who want to come to the department for whatever reason and have that experience of either
Yeah.
getting down and paying in the department or staying in line on 37th Street.
Right.
If you go now, West Palm Beach Utility,
Okay.
like I did in 2004, and you spend your time and you sit in the lobby for 8 hours, you know how many customer service representatives they have, or they had in 2004? 3.
And how many do we have, just for comparison?
We have 15.
15? Okay.
And because most of it is automated.
Okay.
Most of it's automated. As a matter of fact, getting ready for this meeting, I did a little bit of research and I found out, remember we talked about kiosk?
Yes.
Remember? And kiosk is a big issue and interface with the billing system and the world's going to come to an end and all those
Sky
things.
is falling.
City of Edgewater, I found a contract. I
Mhm.
haven't read it yet, so I don't know the details. I don't know the cost. City of Edgewater has a contract. They got kiosk all over Edgewater. Edgewater is a little city, right, on the, by Palm Coast, I believe it
Yep.
is, in the middle of the state, on the east side. And people go to those kiosks. And people go ahead and put their credit card or their check
Right.
and make their payments at that point in time. And I would like to do that and try that. Maybe here at City Hall, maybe at the library, maybe somewhere else, to see if people would change their mode, their behavior. I guess that's what we're talking about. And start using other modes so you can make their experience better. I would like to, I used to have a list of things that I wanted to accomplish from on that side of the house. And when you look at other municipalities, I believe Hollywood is one, if I'm not mistaken. They apply, they do everything online. They fill out an application for service, they send their information in, and we're not there yet.
Right. Yeah. So I just,
So I agree with you. I think it runs hand in hand, to tell you the truth.
Mhm.
The issue is funding. Yeah.
yeah.
Where?
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah, yeah.
I grew up 10 minutes from there. I remember just one person there.
No.
I do, but I grew up 10 minutes from there. Yeah.
And that's what Brian's talking about is improving the customer experience. And I think with technology, you make it easier. I don't know about the
Yeah.
I don't know about the older customers, if that transition would take place, but at least the more savvy customers that are dealing with technology and are able to do that, I think that would be very helpful.
Can you help me understand what does it look like now? I mean, luckily I haven't had a water issue, so I don't know. But you have these 15 customer service reps, right? Obviously, some people are going just to make their monthly or bi-monthly payments. Other people presumably are there because they have a dispute or whatever other issue they want to talk about. So what would it look like on the resident standpoint? Me walking into the water department, are these 15 folks there full time? All of them? What powers do they have in order to get resolution in place?
It all depends on the time of the month.
Okay.
The lobby gets extremely busy at the beginning of the month and the end of the month, particularly when renters are moving in and out.
Yeah.
And that's when you get a larger crowd. That's when we get a heavy crowd in customer service. You have some customer service representatives sitting on the phone and handling phone calls, and you have some of them sitting at the windows handling customer issues.
Right.
And in the windows, for the most part, they're, except for what we talked about on businesses and the Durham issues and those kind of issues, for the most part, they're able to resolve a large percentage of the customer's concern.
Yeah, and I don't know if you even track this, but my question was, how much time does it take from the moment I walk into that department with my issue until I walk out, assuming it's something, I guess, not too complicated?
Depends on the time of the month. You may come in there on a second of the month and you got 30 people in front of you or 20 people in front of you.
Right.
You may come in there in the middle of the month, and there may be 4 or 5 people. So it depends. That's difficult to gauge because the last week of the month and the first week of the month are extremely heavy. for
Right.
us.
Yeah, because here's what I know, and this is what I hear a lot from residents. I'm just simply conveying what they
No, no,
convey to
I
us.
understand, I understand.
And so I tried it, right, out of curiosity. I called the water department, right, and I just left it on my desk, and I wanted to see how long it would take.
I hope you didn't call today.
No, not today. Luckily, not today. And it's, to be quite honest, it took about an hour for them to answer the phone. And I did the English side. I didn't even try the Spanish side. I'm assuming more people pick that option. Um, and I think that when it comes to, and we were talking about this before, when it comes to the proximity to government, managing a municipal is so much more difficult because you get the complaint immediately. Whether if you spend 3 hours calling the IRS, who are you going to complain to? Your congressman, they're not going to do anything.
You better pay your taxes.
So, is there a way, is it feasible to lower those wait times, to try to speed up this process? Would it look like hiring more customer service representatives? What would that look like? So we can just have, I guess, a menu of choices
Okay.
so that we can decide, hey, this is what we want to do. We
can
can't
look
do
at
that.
Have somebody do
Whether
that.
that's, and I'm not sure, and I'd like your take on it. How are we struggling within the water department with the issue of hiring qualified folks? Because I've gone around the different departments, and that's their biggest struggle, trying to get people at the rates that we pay as a city that are qualified for the position. So I wanted to see how that was playing out within
Our
our
hiring is
department.
done by HR,
Okay.
and they go through, human resources go through that process. My staff are involved in the interview process. They have a training. It all depends where you're going to work. If you're going to be in the engineering office, of course, you're going to be an engineer and have some kind of training in that area. If you're going to be in customer service, you have to make absolutely sure you fill the requirements of that position description. And once HR decides that that is the case,
Right.
those people are referred to us.
So if I wanted to work in the water department, what would be my starting pay if I'm a customer service rep?
I don't know. Whatever the position says is going to be your starting pay, whatever your pay range is going to be.
Okay.
May I, with your permission, may I interrupt? Those are, please forgive me, those are two super important topics that we deal with all the time. We need to have another workshop so we won't go over the time. And because they are worthwhile questions, sir. And if that's okay with you, and if that's okay
fine.
with you, Ryan, because we're
Well,
pushing,
I mean,
is that okay?
If you're cutting me off, sure.
Can we do that? Can we defer that to the next? Because it's so important.
But,
It's
but
so
through the
important
chair,
that-
absolutely.
Yes,
That's something
ma'am.
that we have to
Yeah,
address. And
it really
I
is.
have some questions that goes along with that, but I don't want to address it today. Also, just for the sake of everybody else. Is that okay if we discuss it?
It's the pleasure of everybody. I'm just,
Because
But
it
they're very valid.
it is worth a lot more conversation than
Absolutely.
5 or 10 minutes. It is
Yes.
a worthwhile thing, and we don't want to rush. through
yeah,
it.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think
That's okay?
these are they're just the pressing questions because I think in order to really wrap our hands around this, which I think is kind of like the goal, we need to be very creative.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's 1,000 ways to spend the money, but what's going to give us the
Agreed.
most bang for our buck?
Agree. Sir,
As long as you realize, to close, as long as you realize it's a zero-sum game, right?
Yep,
You understand that?
mhm.
the game theory.
Huh?
It's a game theory.
No, it's not a game theory.
Well,
The-
zero-sum
the guy-
game
the
is
guy-
a game
the
theory.
guy won, I think, a Nobel Prize when he wrote it. It's a zero-sum game, and you need to, and it tails off on something you just said. You need to find a way of how to redistribute that pie. Because irrespective if the rates go up or the rates go down, in my mind, the pie is not growing.
Right.
and you still have these obligations you have to meet. And we can have all the goals you want,
Mhm.
but that pie is fixed. And unless you redistribute that pie or grow that
And
pie,
we're even thinking about reducing the pie.
even reducing the pie,
Exactly.
you're going to have to be extremely creative. And I think, in all honesty, and I'm glad we're having this discussion, that's what technology can help. That's what technology.
I am in total agreement.
It may take to spend money to reduce and have a better distribution of the resources we have.
Sir,
Okay.
in compliment to you in closing, you hesitated when he asked, and that's a question anybody asks, how do you rate your department? You've been here 24 years, right? Ever since you've been here, unless there's a major damage, every time I open my faucet, and that's what I hear from every, good, clean water comes out, and every time I flush that toilet, whatever's in there disappears. That's a testament. That's most of the battle right there, sir. So, yeah.
My goal is very simple. I
Mhm.
appreciate that.
And that's the job,
People-
yeah.
And
Yeah.
how I say this.
Hey, that's the
People-
main job.
The job we do is not very grateful because you don't see what we do. You don't see when that water, what happens to the water when it goes underground.
Disappears and we're happy about
And
it, but
you
nobody
flush
knows.
your toilet and you're
That's right.
done.
Yeah,
Now you know when you know? When you don't have any water,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
When you can't flush your toilet,
Agreed.
that's when you realize how important that commodity is to you.
Absolutely. I agree. I understand. Motion, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
And I have a second, third, and fourth. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.